The Book of Exodus, chapters 1 through 8. Chapter 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Mitzrayim, the chief Jacob and his family with him: Reuben, Simeon, Levi and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All the persons proceeding from the loins of Jacob were 70 individuals. Joseph was already in Mitzrayim. Now Joseph and all his brothers died, and all their children. But the sons of Israel were fruitful and bred and increased, and became very, very powerful, and the land was filled with them. Then a foreign conqueror arose over the Mitzrayim who knew nothing of Joseph, and said to his nation, "These people, the sons of Israel, are more in number and stronger than ourselves. Therefore let us deal skillfully with them, to prevent them increasing, for it is possible they might turn upon us in war and conquer, for they hate us, and may be fighting against us and expel us from the land." They consequently placed labor masters over them to force them to build, and they built fortresses for Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they oppressed them, the more they increased. Therefore they trembled and feared before the sons of Israel. Consequently the Mitzrites endeavored to crush the sons of Israel, so they embittered their lives by cruel labor in the forges, and in the brick kilns, and in every labor upon the land, by every means possible trying to crush them. The king of the Mitzrayim also summoned the midwives of the Hebrews, of whom the name of the chief was Shiphrah, and the name of her lieutenant Phuah, and decreed, "When you deliver the Hebrew women, examine their children. If it is a son, kill him, but if a daughter, let her live." But the midwives feared God, and did not do as the king of the Mitzrayim ordered them, but preserved the children alive. The king of the Mitzrayim therefore summoned those midwives again, and inquired from them, "Why have you not executed the law, but have preserved the children's lives?" When the midwives replied to Pharaoh, "Because they are not like Mitzrite women when in labor, but lively, so that before the time the midwives have come to them, they are delivered." Therefore God showed kindness to those midwives. So the people increased and were very strong, and seeing that the midwives were God-fearing, he imprisoned them. Pharaoh then commanded this people, saying, "Every boy that is born, throw him into the river, but let the girls live." Chapter 2. But there was a man of the family of Levi who married a Levite woman, and his wife conceived and bore a son. When she looked on his beauty, she hid him for 3 months. But being no longer able to hide him, she made a boat of bulrushes and pitched it with pitch and resin, and placed it in the reeds on the bank of the river. But his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, and her maids walked along the bank of the stream. And they noticed the boat amongst the rushes. So she put out her hand and took it. When she opened it, she saw the lad, and he cried. And she grieved over him, and said, "It is one of the Hebrew children." Then his sister called the daughter of Pharaoh. "Shall I go and seek for you a nursing woman of the Hebrews, so that she may nurse the lad for you?" And the daughter of Pharaoh replied to her, "Go." So she went immediately and called the mother of the child, to whom Pharaoh's daughter said, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay you the cost." Its mother therefore took the child and nursed it. When the lad grew up, he was taken to the daughter of Pharaoh as a son, and she called his name Moshe, for she said, "I drew him out of the water." But it was long after this, when Moses had become great, that he went out to his brothers, and examined into their condition. Then he saw a Mitzrite strike a Hebrew who was related to him. Then he turned this and that way, and not seeing anyone, he struck the Mitzrite and concealed him in the sand. At another time, when he was inspecting, there were 2 men, Hebrews, quarreling. So he said to the wrongdoer, "Why do you strike your neighbor?" But he replied, "Who appointed you as foreman and judge over us? Are you going to murder me as you murdered the Mitzrite?" Then Moses was afraid, and said to himself, "That affair is known then?" The matter was also reported to Pharaoh, who endeavored to execute Moses. But Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh, and turned to the land of Midian, where he rested beside a well. It happened that the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and these girls came to draw and fill the watering troughs to give drink to their father's sheep. Then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses arose and prevented them and watered their sheep. So when they returned to Reuel, their father, he asked, "How is that you have returned so quickly today?" They answered him, "A Mitzrayite protected us from the hand of the shepherds, and also drew and gave water to our sheep." Then he replied to his daughters, "Where is he? Why have you left the man there? Invite him and let him eat bread." Thus Moses began to stay with the man, who gave Zipporah his daughter to him. And she bore a son, and he called his name Gershom. "For," he said, "I am a stranger in a foreign land." A long time after these events, that king of the Mitzrayim died. But the children of Israel were still oppressed in their servitude, and their cries from their slavery reached God. God therefore heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, and with Isaac, and with Jacob. Therefore God looked upon the children of Israel, and God revealed himself. Chapter 3. Moses, however, was shepherding the sheep of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he had led the sheep to the far side of the desert, and came to the mountain of God in Horeb, where a messenger of the ever-living appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush. When he looked, he saw that the bush burnt with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, "I will draw near and examine this great wonder, why the bush is not burnt up." But the Lord saw that he had approached to examine it. So God called to him from the midst of Sinai and said, "Moses! Moses!" And he answered, "I am here." Then he said, "Approach not. Put off your shoes from your feet, for the place upon which you stand is holy." Then he continued, "I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Then Moses hid his face, for he feared to gaze upon God. The Lord then said, "I have seen the suffering of my people who are in Mitzrayim, and I have heard their shrieks before their drivers, and I have understood their sorrows. And I have come down to deliver them from the hand of the Mitzrayites, and to take them up from that country to a good land, and a spacious, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to replace the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Ivites, and Jebusites. For the cries of the children of Israel have now come to me, and I have seen the oppression with which the Mitzrayites oppress them. Therefore you must go, and I will send you to Pharaoh, to bring my people, the children of Israel, up from the Mitzrayim." But Moses replied to God, "Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should lead the children of Israel up from among the Mitzrayim?" He answered, however, "Because I will be with you, therefore go. For I have sent you to lead the people from the Mitzrayim, and they shall serve God upon this mountain." Then Moses said to God, "Supposing I should go to the children of Israel, and should say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they should ask me, 'What is his name?' What am I to say to them?" When God responded to Moses, "I am what I am. Therefore say, 'I am has sent me to you.'" And God further spoke to Moses, "You shall say thus to the children of Israel, 'The ever-living God of your forefathers, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name from eternity, and I remember this from generation to generation. Go and assemble the chiefs of Israel, and say to them, The ever-living God of your fathers has appeared to me, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and said, I have visited you, and I will save you from the Mitzrayites. Therefore I command you to go from among the Mitzrayites to the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey, and they will listen to your voice. Then go, you and the chiefs of Israel, to the king of the Mitzrayim, and say to him, The ever-living God of your servants has commanded us. Therefore we pray, let us go a 3 days' journey into the desert, and offer sacrifice to our ever-living God. But I know that the king of the Mitzrayim will not permit you to go except by a strong hand. Consequently I shall stretch out my hand and strike the Mitzrayites with all the wonders that I will do within their bounds, and afterwards he will send you away. Then I will give this people favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites, so that it shall be, when they march, they shall not march unprovided. But every woman shall demand of her neighbor and from the guests in her house ornaments of silver and ornaments of gold, and clothing, and put them upon her sons and daughters, and shall strip the Mitzrites. Chapter 4. Then Moses answered and said, But they may not trust me and not listen to my voice, for they may say, We have never seen your God, the ever-living. God, however, asked him, What is in your hand? And he replied, A stick. And he then said, Throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. But the ever-living said to Moses, Stretch out your hand and seize it by the tail. So he stretched out his hand and seized it, and it became a stick in his hand. Be certain they will believe because of that the ever-living God of their fathers appeared to you, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And continuing, the ever-living said to him, Put your hand now into your bosom. So he put his hand into his bosom, and when he drew it out, his hand was leprous like snow. Then he said, Replace your hand in your bosom. So he replaced his hand in his bosom, and took it out again from his bosom, and it returned like his other flesh. And it shall be, if they will not trust you and not listen to your voice at the first evidence, yet they will trust to your voice after the second sign. But if they do not trust you even for the second evidence, and do not listen to your voice, then take some of the water from the river and pour it out on the dry land, and there the water which you have taken from the river shall become blood on the dry ground. Moses, however, replied to the ever-living, But yet, Lord, I am not an eloquent man. I have not been so in the past, nor in this speaking between you and your servant, for I am slow of mouth and heavy of tongue. But the ever-living replied to him, Who gave a mouth to man? Or who makes dumb, or deaf, or blind, or seeing? Is it not I, the living one? So now go, and I will be with your mouth, and show you what you shall say. But he answered, Indeed, my lord, send, I pray you, by some other hand. Then the ever-living was angry with Moses, and he said, Have you not a brother, Aaron the Levite? I know that he can talk, and he is even now coming to seek you. See that you can go cheerfully with him, and speak to him, and put words into his mouth, for I will be with your mouth, and in his mouth, and will show you what you are to do, and he shall speak for you to the people. He shall be like a mouth for you, and you shall be to him in place of God. And that staff, take it in your hand, for you shall perform wonders with it. Moses therefore went and returned to Jethro his father-in-law, and said to him, I wish to go now and rejoin my relatives who are in Mizraim, and see if they are alive. When Jethro replied to Moses, Go in peace. The ever-living afterwards said to Moses in Midian, Go, return to the Mizraim, for all the men are dead who sought your life. Then Moses took his wife and his sons, and mounted them upon asses, and turned towards the land of the Mizraim. Moses also took the rod of God in his hand. The living one also said further to Moses, During your journey to the Mizraim, regard all the signs which I put unto your hand, and do them before Pharaoh. But I shall harden his heart, and he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, Thus said the ever-living, Israel is my eldest son, and I say to you, Allow my son to go to serve him. And if you will not allow him, then I will slay your eldest son. But while he was upon the road at a resting place, a chieftain met him and attempted to kill him. But Zipporah took a razor and cut off the foreskin of her son, and threw it at his feet, and said, You make a blood marriage for me. So he retired from them, when she said, It is a marriage circumcision. Now the ever-living had said to Aaron, Go and seek Moses in the desert. So he went and met him at the mount of God, and kissed him. Then Moses related to Aaron all the instructions of the ever-living which he had sent to him, and the whole of the miracles which he had commanded. Then Moses and Aaron proceeded and collected all the magistracy of the children of Israel. And Aaron repeated all the matters which the ever-living had addressed to Moses, and produced evidences before the eyes of the people. And the people were convinced, and acknowledged that the ever-living had visited Israel, and that he had looked upon their sufferings. So they honored and worshipped him. Chapter 5. Then Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, Thus says the ever-living God of Israel, Send out my people that they may hold a festival to me in the desert. But Pharaoh replied, Who is the ever-living, that I should listen to his voice to send out the Israelites? I know nothing of the ever-living, and I shall not send the Israelites out. They, however, replied, The God of the Hebrews has summoned us. Let us go therefore 3 days' journey into the desert, and sacrifice to our ever-living God, for fear he should assail us with plague or fever. The king of the Mitzrayim said to them, Why do you, Moses and Aaron, break off the people from their work? Go yourselves to the buildings. And Pharaoh went on to say, The people are now too many for the land, yet you would take them away from building. Pharaoh consequently commanded on that day to the drivers and overseers, saying, You shall not continue to give straw to these people for the bricks they make as heretofore, but let them go and collect straw for themselves. Yet the number of the bricks which they had to make heretofore lay upon them. You shall not diminish from them, for they are idle. Therefore they cry out, saying, Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Increase the work upon these men, and make them do it, and not listen to absurd speeches. The drivers and overseers of the people consequently went and reported it to the people, saying thus, Pharaoh has ordered us no more to give you straw. Therefore go, collect straw for yourselves wherever you can find it, for there is to be no diminution of your labors whatever. So the people were scattered all over the land of the Mitzrayim to seek stubble instead of straw. Yet the drivers ordered them, saying, Complete your appointed work day by day in the production of bricks. And the overseers who were set over the children of Israel were flogged by the drivers of Pharaoh, who demanded, Why have you not completed the stipulated number of bricks as formerly was done before this? Then the overseers of the children of Israel appealed to Pharaoh, asking, Why have you done this to your slaves? No straw is given to your slaves, yet they say to us, Make the bricks, and your slaves are beaten, and your people injured. He, however, replied, You are idle, you are idle. Therefore you say, Let us go and sacrifice to the ever-living. So now be off, you slaves, for straw shall not be given to you, but you shall make the number of your bricks. Consequently, the overseers of the children of Israel saw they were in a bad position, when he said, You shall not diminish from the number of bricks day by day. So they assailed Moses and Aaron for inciting them to go to present themselves to Pharaoh, and said to them, May the ever-living look upon you and decide how you have made our breath stink in the opinion of Pharaoh and in the opinion of his ministers, and have put a sword into their hands to slay us. Then Moses turned to the ever-living and said, Almighty, why have you caused suffering to this people, and why have you sent me thus? And why have you sent me to Pharaoh, saying, I will take this people from their suffering, when you have not delivered them? Chapter 6. Then the ever-living replied to Moses, Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, so that with a strong hand he shall send off, and with a strong hand he shall drive them from this country. Afterwards the ever-living spoke to Moses, and said to him, I am the ever-living, and I appeared to Abraham, and to Isaac, and to Jacob, as God Almighty, and by my name of the ever-living I did not make myself known to them. But however I made a covenant with them to give to them the land of Canaan, the land of their foreignhood, when they were foreigners in it. I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel who are enslaved by the Mitzrites, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore say to the children of Israel, I am, the ever-living, will cause you to come out from among the burdens of the Mitzrites, and I will deliver you from your slavery, and will redeem you with a directing arm, and with great judgments, and will take you to myself for a people, and will be a God to you, and you shall know that I, your ever-living God, have brought you out from among the burdens of the Mitzrites. I will also bring you to the land which I raised my hand to give to Abraham, and to Isaac, and to Jacob, and grant you its possession. I am the ever-living. Consequently Moses repeated this to the children of Israel, but they would not listen to Moses for their anguish of spirit, and from their hard slavery. The ever-living again spoke to Moses, saying, Go, tell to Pharaoh, king of Mitzar, that he must dismiss the children of Israel from his country. But Moses replied against the ever-living and said, The children of Israel themselves would not listen to me, so certainly Pharaoh will not listen to me. I am also dull in speech. The ever-living, however, commanded Moses and Aaron again, and sent them to the children of Israel and to Pharaoh king of the Mitzrayim, to demand the release of the children of Israel from the land of the Mitzrayim. Thus the ever-living spoke to Aaron and Moses to lead the children of Israel out of the land of the Mitzrayim by their armies. He caused them, Moses and Aaron, to demand from Pharaoh king of the Mitzrayim to allow the children of Israel to go out of Mitzrayim. The ever-living was speaking daily to Moses in the land of the Mitzrayim. Thus the Lord commanded Moses, I am the ever-living. Speak to Pharaoh king of the Mitzrayim all that I command you. But Moses replied in the face of the ever-living, I am only slow of tongue, so Pharaoh will not listen to me. Chapter 7. The ever-living, however, answered Moses, See, I will make you like a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother shall be your reciter. Therefore you must say all that I command you to your brother, and he shall repeat to Pharaoh that he must send the children of Israel from his country. But I will make Pharaoh's heart obstinate, and I will multiply evidences and wonders in the land of the Mitzrayim. But Pharaoh will not listen to you, so I will lay my hand upon the Mitzrites, and will bring out my people, the children of Israel, from the land of the Mitzrayim, with great judgments, so that the Mitzrites may know that I am the ever-living, when I stretch out my hand over the Mitzrayim, and bring up the children of Israel from among them. So Moses and Aaron did as the ever-living commanded them. They did it. But Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 86 years old, when they spoke to Pharaoh. Thus the ever-living spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, Since Pharaoh has said to you, Give us an evidence, instruct Aaron, Take your rod and throw it down before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent. Moses and Aaron therefore went to Pharaoh, and did as the ever-living commanded, and he threw down his rod before Pharaoh, and before his ministers, and it became a serpent. But Pharaoh summoned the scientists and chemists, and they also did it, assisted by the engineers of the Mitzrayim, by their delusions. For each of them threw down their rods, and they became serpents, but the rod of Aaron swallowed their rods. However, the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the ever-living had foretold. The ever-living then said to Moses, The heart of Pharaoh is decided not to let the people depart. Confront Pharaoh in the morning when he goes to the bath, and stand to meet him at the bank of the river, and take the rod which turned to a serpent in your hand. Then say to him, The ever-living God of the Hebrews has sent me to you to say, Let my people go and serve me in the desert. But if you will not listen to that, thus says the ever-living, By this you shall learn that I am the master, when I strike with the rod which is in my hand upon the waters which are in the river, they shall turn to blood. And the fish which are in the river shall die, and the river shall stink, and the Mitzrites shall loathe to drink of the water of the river. The ever-living also said to Moses, Say to Aaron, Take your rod and extend your hand over the waters of Mitzar, over the streams, over the brooks, the pools, and over all the reservoirs of water, and they shall become blood, and they shall be blood in all the land of the Mitzrites, both in wood and in stone. Therefore Moses and Aaron did as the ever-living commanded, and splashed with the rod and the hand the waters which were in the river before the eyes of Pharaoh and before the eyes of his ministers. And all the waters in the river turned to blood, and the fish which were in the river died, and the river stank, and the Mitzrites were not able to drink of the water from the river, for it became blood in all the land of the Mitzrayim. The engineers of Mitzar, however, did the same by their delusions. Therefore the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the ever-living had foretold. Pharaoh therefore turned his face and went to his palace, and did not alter his heart even for this. But all the Mitzrites dug pits along the river for water to drink, for they were not able to drink the waters from the river. This continued for 7 days after the ever-living had struck the waters of the river. Then the ever-living said to Moses, Go to Pharaoh and say to him, Thus says the ever-living, Send my people away to serve me. But if you will not send them, then I will plague all your dominions with frogs, and the water shall swarm with frogs, and they shall crawl up and come into your palace, and to your chamber, to your couch, and up to your bed, and to the palaces of your ministers, and of your people, and to your daughters. In this way the frogs shall come up upon your people and ministers. Chapter 8. Then the ever-living said to Moses, Command your brother Aaron, extend your hand with your rod over the rivers and streams and lakes, so that the frogs may come up over the land of Mitzar. Aaron consequently extended his hand over the waters of Mitzar, and frogs came up and plagued the land of the Mitzrayim. The scientists, however, did the same by their engineering, and also brought up frogs upon the land of the Mitzrayim. Pharaoh, however, summoned Moses and Aaron and said, Entreat the ever-living, that he may turn away the frogs from my sight and from my touch, when I will release the people, and they shall sacrifice to the ever-living. But Moses replied to Pharaoh, You threatened me you would kill me. Why should I pray for you and your ministers and your people to drive away the frogs from you and from your palace, except that there may be a few in the river? He, however, entreated, Do it tomorrow. And he returned, It shall be done as you say, so that you may know that there is no Lord except our God. Therefore the frogs shall turn back from you, and from your palace, and from your ministers, and from your people, except that in the river there shall be a few. Then Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried to the ever-living about the frogs, as he had promised to Pharaoh. And the ever-living did as Moses had said, and killed the frogs in the houses, and in the streets, and in the fields, and the heaps of them corrupting rotted, and the country stunk. But when Pharaoh perceived the smell of them, then he hardened his heart and would not listen to them, as the ever-living had foretold. Consequently the ever-living said to Moses, Say to Aaron, Extend your rod, and beat the dust of the earth, and it shall become lice in all the land of the Mitzrayim. And he did so. When Aaron extended his hand with his rod in it, and struck the dust of the earth, it became lice in all the land of the Mitzrayim. The scientists also tried by their contrivances to produce the same, and bring forth lice, but they were not able. These lice assailed both men and beasts. Then the scientists reported to Pharaoh, This is the product of God. But Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not listen to them, as the ever-living had foretold. Therefore the ever-living said to Moses, Arise at daybreak and stand before Pharaoh when he goes to bathe, and say to him, Thus says the ever-living, Release my people that they may serve me. For if you do not release my people, I myself will release against you and your ministers and your people and your daughters gadflies. And the gadflies shall fill the houses of the Mitzrites, and also the land upon which they are. But at the same time it shall be different in the land of Goshen, where my people dwell. For the gadflies shall not be there, so that you may know that I am the ever-living in the midst of the earth. I will also make a distinction between my people and your people. This shall occur tomorrow. And the ever-living did it. For swarms of gadflies came into the palace of Pharaoh, and the palaces of his ministers, and to all the land of the Mitzrayim. The gadflies spread over all the country. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, Go, sacrifice to your God in this country. But Moses replied, We were not instructed to do so. For if we were to sacrifice the idol of the Mitzrites in their sight, would they not stone us? We must go 3 days' journey into the desert, and sacrifice to our ever-living God as he has commanded us. Then Pharaoh answered, I will send you, and you shall sacrifice to your ever-living God in the desert. Only in separating go not a long journey. Now pray for me. And Moses answered, I will go out from you and pray, and entreat the ever-living, and he will turn away the gadflies from Pharaoh, and from his ministers, and from his people tomorrow. Nevertheless, Pharaoh will continue to oppose, and will not allow the people to go away to sacrifice to the ever-living. Moses accordingly went out from the presence of Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord, and the ever-living answered Moses and removed the gadflies from Pharaoh and from his ministers and from his people, and none remained. Pharaoh, however, hardened his heart even after this, and would not release the people. The end of chapters 1 through 8 of the book of Exodus. Recording by Mark Penfold. The book of Exodus, chapters 9 through 16. Chapter 9. Consequently the ever-living said to Moses, Go to Pharaoh and tell him, Thus says the ever-living God of the Hebrews, Let my people go, and serve me. However, if you are unwilling to release them, and you are again obstinate with them, then the hand of the ever-living shall bring upon your herds that are in the field, and upon your horses, and asses, and camels, and cattle, and sheep, a very severe punishment. But the ever-living will distinguish between the herds of Israel and between the herds of the Mizrahites, and in all the herds of Israel nothing shall die. The ever-living, however, fixed a period. After a while the ever-living will do this thing in the country. The ever-living accordingly brought the event at the period, and killed a number of the cattle of the Mizrahites, but of the cattle of the Israelites not any died. Pharaoh also sent to examine, and discovered that of the cattle of the Israelites none had died. Yet Pharaoh hardened his heart, and would not let the people go. Subsequently the ever-living said to Moses and Aaron, Take up for yourselves hands full of ashes from the smeltery furnaces, and let Moses fling them to the sky in the sight of Pharaoh, and they shall become a fine dust over all the land of Mitzar, and it shall settle upon man and beast, to inflame and produce boils in all the land of the Mitzrayim. They took therefore ashes from a smeltery, and presented themselves before Pharaoh. And Moses flung them skyward, and they produced inflammatory boils upon man and beast, and the scientists were not able to stand before Moses, for the inflammation came upon the scientists as well as upon the other Mitzrahites. But the ever-living hardened Pharaoh's heart, so he would not listen to them, as the ever-living had foretold to Moses. Afterwards the ever-living said to Moses, Arise at dawn, and go and stand before Pharaoh, and say to him, Thus says the ever-living God of the Hebrews, Release my people to serve me, or else this time I will fling with all my might upon your heart, and on your ministers, and on your people, so that they may learn that there is none except myself in the whole earth. For now I will send my hand against and strike you, yourself and your people, with the object of destroying you from the earth. If you oppose yourself to my people, to prevent them from going, I will rain at the date appointed in the future very fierce hail, such as has not been in Mitzar from the day it was founded until now. Therefore send your cattle to shelters, and all that you have in the field. Every man and beast that remains in the field and is not gathered into houses, the hail will come down upon them and kill them. Those of the ministers of Pharaoh who feared the message of the ever-living collected their servants and their cattle into the houses. But those who did not lay the message of the ever-living to heart left their servants and cattle in the field. The ever-living afterwards said to Moses, Extend your hand to the skies, and there will come hail in all the land of the Mitzrayim, upon man, and upon beast, and upon all that is in the field, in the land of the Mitzrayim. So Moses extended his rod to the skies, and the ever-living uttered his voice, and fire ran along the ground, and the ever-living poured hail upon the land of the Mitzrayim. And there was hail and continuous fire mixed with the hail, very cruel, such as had never been like it in all the land of the Mitzrayim, from when it became a nation. The hail also struck in all the land of the Mitzrayim whatever was in the field, from man to beast, and all the vegetation of the field was struck by the hail, and all the trees of the field broken, except in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were. There the hail was not. After this Pharaoh sent and invited Moses and Aaron, and said to them, I have sinned this time. The ever-living has done right, and I and my people have done wrong. Pray to the ever-living, for mighty are the utterances of God, and the hail, and I will release you, and no more continue to prevent. But Moses answered him, When I am outside of the city, I will spread out my hands to the ever-living, when the voices will cease, and the hail will not continue, so that you may learn that the earth belongs to the ever-living, and that you and your ministers may learn at last to fear before the presence of the ever-living God. So the flax and the barley were cut up, for the barley was in ear, and the flax in flour. But the wheat and rye were not cut up, for they were of later growth. When Moses went from the presence of Pharaoh outside the city, he spread his hands before the ever-living, and the voices ceased, and the hailstorm poured not earthward. But when Pharaoh perceived that the rain and hail and voices had ceased, he continued to sin and hardened his heart, he and his ministers. So Pharaoh's heart was obstinate, and he would not release the children of Israel, as the ever-living foretold by the hand of Moses. Chapter 10. Therefore the ever-living said to Moses, Go to Pharaoh, for I will strike his heart and the heart of his ministers with 2 other evidences in their midst, that you can record for the ears of your sons and your sons' sons how I brought you up from the Mitzrayim, and the evidences that I produced among them, that they might know that I am the ever-living. Moses and Aaron consequently went to Pharaoh and said to him, Thus says the ever-living God of the Hebrews, Until when will you refuse, resisting to my face to release my people to serve me? However, if you continue refusing to release my people, I will bring locusts shortly into your dominions, and they shall hide the sight of the ground, so that you shall not be able to see the ground, and they shall eat the remains of the fragments of what has been left to you from the hail, and shall eat all your fruit trees from the field, and shall fill your palace and the palaces of your ministers and the houses of all the Mizrahites in such a way as you have never seen, or your fathers, or the fathers of your fathers, from the day they lived upon the earth to this day. Then he ceased and went away from Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh's ministers said to him, How long is this thing to go on with us, to ensnare us? Release these men to serve their ever-living God. Do you not know that Mizar is already destroyed? Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he accordingly said to them, Go, serve the ever-living your God. Who and what do you wish should go with you? So Moses replied, With our young and our old we shall go, with our sons and our daughters, with our sheep and our cattle we shall go, so that we may hold a holy festival to our God. He, however, exclaimed, The ever-living must be with you. Then when I let you go with your children, look out, for evil is before you. It shall never be so, but you may go now and make a pilgrimage and serve your ever-living, for that is what you asked. And they were driven from the presence of Pharaoh. Then the ever-living said to Moses, Stretch out your hand over the land of the Mitzrayim for the locusts, and they shall come up upon the land of Mitzar, and shall eat everything green in the country, all that the hail has left. So Moses extended his rod over the country of the Mitzrayim, and the ever-living drove an east wind over the country all that day and all the night until the morning came, and the east wind carried the locusts. And the locusts came up over all the country of the Mitzrayim, and seized upon all the dominions of the Mitzrayim very grievously. Before them there were no such locusts, and never since have there been such. They even hid the ground from sight, and blackened the earth, and ate every green thing upon the ground, and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left, and no verdure was left on the trees, or grass on the fields, in all the land of the Mitzrayim. Then Pharaoh hastened and summoned Moses and Aaron, and said, I have sinned against the ever-living God and against you. Therefore pardon now my sin, only this once, and entreat the ever-living God to turn from me also this death. So they went out from Pharaoh, and entreated the ever-living, and the Lord caused a very strong west wind to blow, and it swept off the locusts, and blew them into the Red Sea. There was not a locust in all the dominions of the Mitzrayim. But the ever-living strengthened the heart of Pharaoh, and he would not release the children of Israel. Afterwards the ever-living said to Moses, Stretch your hand towards the sky, and darkness shall come upon all the land of the Mitzrayim, and a darkness that may be felt. Therefore Moses stretched his hand to the skies, and thick darkness came upon all the land of the Mitzrayim for 3 days. No one saw his brother, and no one rose from his place for 3 days. But to all the children of Israel there was light for their operations. Then Pharaoh sent for Moses and said, Go, serve the ever-living. Only your sheep and cattle must stay. Your children also may go with you. But Moses replied, You must also give to our hands sacrifices and offerings that we can make to our ever-living God, and therefore our herds must go with us, not a hoof must be left. For we must take from them to serve our ever-living God, and we cannot be knowing what we must serve the ever-living with until we arrive there. The Lord, however, hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he was not willing to release the people. Therefore Pharaoh replied to him, Get off from me, and take care to yourself never again to see my face. For on the day you look again on my face, you shall die. When Moses answered, As you have spoken right, I never will look on your face again. Chapter 11. Then the ever-living said to Moses, I will bring yet another blow upon Pharaoh and upon the Mitzrayim, after which he will release you. They all will release you, driving you from there. Therefore privately instruct the people that they must demand, every man from his neighbor, and every woman from her neighbor, articles of silver and articles of gold. The ever-living also gave the people favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites, for the man Moses was very powerful in the land of Mitzr, in the eyes of the ministers of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of the people. After that Moses proclaimed, Thus says the ever-living, At midnight I will pass through the land of the Mitzrayim, and kill all the firstborn in the land of Mitzr, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits upon the throne, to the firstborn of the slave who sits behind the mill, as well as the firstborn of the cattle. And a great cry will go up from all the land of Mitzr, when these are not, and those are perished. But from all the children of Israel there shall not be hurt a dog's tongue, that you may know that the ever-living distinguishes between the Mitzrites and Israel. Then all your ministers shall descend and bow down to me, saying, Go away, you with all the people who are following you, and after that I will depart. Thus he went from before Pharaoh in burning anger. Then the ever-living said to Moses, Since Pharaoh will not listen to you, I will increase my evidences in the land of the Mitzrayim. Therefore Moses and Aaron effected all these evidences before Pharaoh. Yet the ever-living hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he would not release the children of Israel from his country. Chapter 12. Consequently the ever-living spoke to Moses and to Aaron in the land of the Mitzrayim, commanding, This month shall be to you the chief month. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the families of Israel, commanding that in the 10th month they shall take for themselves each one a lamb for a father's house, a lamb for a family. But if the family is too small for a lamb, then let him and the neighbor to his house, according to the number of persons who are to eat, share in the lamb. It must be a perfect he-lamb of a year. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you must keep it by you until the 14th day of this month. Then kill it. All the assembly of the families of Israel must kill it between the dusks. Then they shall take the blood and sprinkle upon the 2 doorposts and upon the lintel of the houses where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roasted with fire. They shall eat it with unfermented bread and bitter herbs. They shall not eat any of it parboiled, or boiled in a boiler, but only roasted with fire, its head and limbs and ribs. And they shall not reserve any of it till the morning, but what is left of it at the morning they shall consume with fire, and they shall eat it in this way, girt with their belts, their shoes on their feet, and their sticks in their hands, and they shall eat it rapidly. It is a passing over to the ever-living. For I will pass through the land of the Mitzrayim in that night, and strike all the firstborn of the Mitzrites from man to beast. Upon all the gods of the Mitzrites also I will execute judgment. I, the ever-living. But the blood upon your houses shall be a safeguard to you, that you are there. When I see the blood, then I will pass over you, and there shall not be a life injured in my destruction of the land of the Mitzrayim. Therefore this day shall be to you for a remembrance and a festival. It shall be a festival to the ever-living in your generations, an ordinance forever. You shall sanctify it. You shall eat unfermented bread for 7 days. That is, in the first day you shall remove ferment from your houses. For all who eat fermented bread then, that person shall be excommunicated from Israel, from the first day to the 7th day. So the first day shall be proclaimed holy, and the 7th day shall be proclaimed holy for you. You shall not do any work upon them, except for what every person must eat. You shall only do that. Therefore guard these days of unfermented bread. For on these days I led out your armies from the land of the Mitzrayim with power. Consequently, keep this period as an everlasting institution in your generations. Beginning at the 14th day of the month at the dusk, to eat fermented bread, until the 21st of the month at dusk. During 7 days, ferment shall not be brought into your houses. For everyone eating of fermented bread, that person shall be excommunicated from the families of Israel, whether a foreigner or a native of the country. You shall not eat of any in your dwellings. You shall eat biscuits. Moses therefore proclaimed to all the magistrates of Israel, saying, Blow the trumpet, and select for yourselves a lamb for your families, and kill the Passover, and take a bunch of hyssop, and dip it in the blood which ensues, and sprinkle the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood which ensues. And none of you shall go out from the door of his house until daybreak. For at dusk the ever-living will strike the Mitzrites. But when he sees the blood on the lintel and upon the 2 doorposts, then the ever-living will pass over the door, and will not allow injury to come to that house to strike it. You shall also keep this command as an institution for you and your sons forever. Also, when you have arrived at the land which the ever-living will give you, as he promised, you shall there also regard this service. And when your children shall say to you, What is this service for? You shall reply, This is the sacrifice of the Passover to the ever-living, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Mitzar, when he struck the Mitzrites and protected our houses. Therefore the people shall bow down and worship. So the children of Israel went and did as the ever-living commanded to Moses and Aaron. They did it. When that midnight came, the ever-living struck all the firstborn in the land of the Mitzrayim, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat upon the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. Then Pharaoh and all his ministers arose in the night with all the Mitzrites, and there was a great shriek among the Mitzrayim, for there was not a house in which there was not someone dead. Consequently he sent to Moses and Aaron by night, and said, Rise up, go away from among my people, both yourselves and the children of Israel. Go, serve the ever-living as he has commanded you, and take your sheep and your cattle as you demanded, and march. But therefore bless me. The Mitzrites also pressed on the people to hasten them to go out from the country. For, they said, we shall all be dead. So the people took up the dough before it was fermented with yeast, rolled up in their knapsacks on their shoulders. The children of Israel also had done as Moses ordered, and had demanded from the Mitzrites ornaments of silver and articles of gold and clothing. And the ever-living gave them favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites. Thus they demanded from them, and escaped from the Mitzrayim. Then the children of Israel marched from Ramesses to the encampment, about 600,000 men, beside children. Many strangers also went up with them, and very great herds of sheep and cattle. They also baked the dough which they had brought from the Mitzrayim into biscuits, before it was fermented, for the Mitzrites drove them, and they were not able to ferment it, as well as also being ordered not to do it. Now the period of the residence of the children of Israel, during which they stayed amongst the Mitzrites, was 430 years. And it was at the end of the 430th year, upon the selfsame day, that all the armies of the ever-living came out from the land of the Mitzrayim. It is a night to be observed to the ever-living, for he brought them out from the land of the Mitzrayim. It is the night of observance to the ever-living, for all the children of Israel and their descendants. The ever-living had said to Moses and Aaron, This is the feast of the Passover, and son of a foreigner shall not eat it, but every person bought with money when he has been circumcised may eat of it. It shall be eaten by single families. They shall not carry any of its flesh outside of the house, and a bone of it shall not be broken. Every family in Israel shall offer it, and if there resides with you a foreigner, and he would offer the Passover to the ever-living, let him cause every male to be circumcised. He may then approach to offer it, when he shall be like a native of the country, but any uncircumcised person shall not eat of it. One law shall be for the native and for the foreigner, who is among you. So all the children of Israel did as the ever-living commanded to Moses and Aaron. They did it. Thus it was on the selfsame day the ever-living caused the children of Israel to go out from the land of the Mitzrayim with their armies. Chapter 13. The ever-living also commanded to Moses, Consecrate to me every firstborn proceeding from every womb of the children of Israel, both of man and beast. It is mine. Therefore Moses said to the people, Remember this day when you came out of the land of the Mitzrayim, from the house of bondage, for with a strong hand the ever-living brought you from there, so you shall not eat fermented bread. The time when you came out was in the month of harvest. Consequently, when the ever-living brings you to the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to give to you, a land flowing with milk and honey, then you shall perform this service in this month. For 7 days you shall eat biscuits, and on the 7th day shall be a festival to the ever-living. You shall eat biscuits for 7 days, and fermented bread shall not be seen with you, nor shall ferment be seen in all your boundaries. You shall inform your children of this day, saying, This is for the passing over the ever-living made for us in bringing us out from the Mitzrayim. Thus it will be to you like a mark on your hand, and as a remembrance between your eyes, so that the reverence for the ever-living may be before you. For with a strong hand the ever-living led you out from the Mitzrayim. Therefore you shall observe this institution for a witness for ever and ever. And when the ever-living has brought you to the land of Canaan, which he promised to you and to your fathers that he would give you, then you shall devote every firstborn of the womb to the ever-living, and every first offspring of cattle which shall come to you as a male, to the ever-living. But every firstborn of an ass you shall redeem with a lamb, or if you do not redeem it, then break its neck. Every eldest male, however, of your children you shall redeem. When any of your sons then shall ask you hereafter, saying, Why is this? You shall reply to him, The ever-living brought us out from the Mitzrayim with a strong hand, from the house of bondage. And when Pharaoh refused to release us, then the ever-living slew all the firstborn in the land of the Mitzrayim, from the firstborn of man to the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the ever-living all the first male offspring of the womb, and all the firstborn of men I redeem. Thus they will be like marks upon your hand, and as frontlets between your eyes, that with a strong hand the ever-living brought you from Mizar. However, when Pharaoh had released the people, God did not conduct them out by way of the country of the Philistines, although it was the nearest. For God said, If I should conduct the people to the site of war, they will return to the Mitzrayim. Therefore God turned the people to the way by the desert of the Sea of Weeds. The children of Israel, however, marched in readiness for battle from the land of the Mitzrayim. Moses also took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had administered an oath to the children of Israel, saying, The ever-living will visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So they marched from the encampment, and pitched on the borders of the desert. And the ever-living went before them by day in a pillar of cloud, to direct them on the way, and in a pillar of fire by night, to light them in the way by day and night. The pillar of cloud never departed by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. Chapter 14. Then the ever-living spoke to Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel that they must turn and encamp before Pi-hachiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal-Zephon. You shall encamp directly opposite the sea. Upon which Pharaoh will exclaim, The children of Israel have confused themselves as to the country. The desert shuts them in. And I will embolden the heart of Pharaoh, and he will pursue you. And then I will be honored by Pharaoh and by all his forces, and the Mitzrites shall know that I am the ever-living. They accordingly did it. When it was reported to the king of the Mitzrayim that the people had fled, then the heart of Pharaoh and of his ministers changed about the people, and they said, What is it that we have done? Why have we released the people from serving us? Consequently he had his own chariot harnessed, and took his forces with him, and took 600 officers' chariots, and all the chariots of the Mitzrayim, with 3 men upon each of them. Thus the ever-living emboldened the heart of Pharaoh, king of the Mitzrayim, and he pursued after the children of Israel. But the children of Israel went out with a high hand. The Mitzrites, however, pursued after them, and came up with them and camped by the sea, all the horse chariots of Pharaoh and his forces, at Pi-hachiroth, before Baal-Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the children of Israel raised their eyes, and saw the Mitzrites marching after them, and they were terrified. So the children of Israel cried out to the ever-living, and they said to Moses, "Because there were no graves among the Mitzrayim, have you brought us out from Mitzar into the desert to die? Was not this what we said to you in Mitzar? Let us alone, and we will serve the Mitzrites? For it is better for us to serve the Mitzrites than that we should die in the desert." Moses, however, replied to the people, "Fear not, stand still, and you shall see the victory of the ever-living which he will effect for you today. For although you see the Mitzrites today, you shall not see them again for ever and ever. The Lord will fight with them, and you shall keep silent." The ever-living then said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Command the children of Israel to march. And you, raise your staff and extend your hand over the sea, when it will divide itself, and the children of Israel can go through it, as upon dry land. But I myself will embolden the hearts of the Mitzrites, and they shall follow after them. Then I shall be honored by Pharaoh and by all his forces, by his charioteers and horsemen, and the Mitzrites shall learn that I am the ever-living, by my conquering over Pharaoh and his horsemen." Then the messenger of God, who went before the camp of Israel, marched, and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud also marched from before them, and stood at their rear, and went between the camp of the Mitzrites and the camp of Israel, and became a cloud and darkness, even of the light of the night, so that the one approached not to the other all the night. When Moses stretched his hand over the sea, the ever-living caused a strong east wind to blow, and rolled back the waters all that night, and made the sea like dry land, and made a plain in the waters. Then the children of Israel passed through the sea on the dried-up part, and the waters were to them a protection on their right hand and upon their left. The Mitzrites also pursued and went after them, all the horse chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen, into the midst of the sea. But when the morning watch arrived, the ever-living looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud onto the army of Mitzrayim, and broke off the wheels from their chariots, and confused the ranks of the drivers, so that the Mitzrites exclaimed, "Let us fly from the presence of Israel, for the ever-living fights for them against the Mitzrites." Then the ever-living said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, and the waters shall return upon the Mitzrites, over their chariots and over their horsemen." So Moses extended his hand over the waters, and the waters returned at the beginning of the morning to their regular flow, and the Mitzrites fled from their approach. Thus the ever-living overwhelmed the Mitzrites in the midst of the sea, and the waters returned and struck the chariots and the horsemen, and all the forces of Pharaoh that went after them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the children of Israel went along upon the dry land in the midst of the sea, and the water was a protection to them on the right and on the left. Thus the ever-living saved Israel at that time from the hand of the Mitzrites. And Israel saw the Mitzrites dead on the shore of the sea, and Israel also saw the great power by which the ever-living dealt with the Mitzrites. Therefore the people feared the ever-living, and trusted in the Lord and Moses his servant. Chapter 15. Then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the ever-living, and said in chorus, "I will sing to the Lord, for with splendid power he has flung the horse and his rider into the sea. I shout and sing to my God, for from him comes my salvation. He is my God, and I rest upon him, the God of my fathers, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior, his name is the Life. He whelmed Pharaoh's cars and his force in the sea, and his generals sank in the sea of the weeds. The breakers sucked to the deeps like stone. Your right hand, Lord, is strong and glorious. Your right hand, Lord, has crushed your foes, and with grandeur destroyed your opponents. You shot your fire, it consumed them as chaff, and the sea was filled by the breath of your mouth. And they lay like heaps for the plunderers. They curdled the waves in the heart of the sea. I will pursue, said the foeman, o'ertake and plunder and sate my lust. Draw my sword, and my hand shall destroy them. You blew with your wind, and the sea overwhelmed, and their princes sank like lead in the seas. Who is like to the Lord among gods? Who like him in his holy splendor, in brightness and honor and powerful acts? You extended your hand, and the earth was shaken. You led in your love this people free, and will bring in your might to your holy home. The nations hearing it trembled. Terror seized on Philistia's men. The chiefs of Edom were also in terror. The princes of Moab shook in their fear, and the people of Canaan dissolved like a cloud. Dread and terror upon them fell. At your mighty power they stood like a stone, until your people, Lord, passed over, until your race had passed out redeemed. Whom you brought and fixed as your own on your hill, the place you had chosen, Lord, for your work, to the temple, Almighty, your hands had made. The Lord will reign forever and ever, for the horse of Pharaoh went with his chariot and with his horsemen into the sea, where the Lord turned on them the flood of the waters. But the children of Israel walked on the dry, through the midst of the sea. Miriam the poetess also, the sister of Aaron, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her with timbrels and dances. And Miriam responded to them, Sing to the Lord, for gloriously triumphing. He has flung the horse and his rider into the sea. Moses afterwards marched the children of Israel from the Red Sea, and departed from the desert of the wall, and advanced 3 days into the desert, but found no water. Then they came to Marah, but were unable to drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore Moses called it bitterness. Then the people came to Moses to say, Why have you done this? So he cried to the Ever-living, and the Ever-living showed him a tree which he put into the water, and it sweetened it. He gave it therefore the name of the pit of calamity, and named it Trial. But he said, If you will listen to the voice of your ever-living God, and do what is right in his eyes, and give your ears to his commands, and keep all his institutions, all the plagues which I laid upon the Mitzrites I will not lay upon you, for I am your ever-living restorer. After that they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water, and several palm trees. So they encamped there by the springs. Chapter 16. Then the children of Israel marched from Elim, and came to Araph, in the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month, from their departure out of the land of the Mitzrayim. But all the families of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the desert. And the children of Israel said to them, Why do you kill us by the hand of the ever-living? In the land of the Mitzrayim we sat by the flesh pots to gorging. Why have you brought all the congregation to this desert to die of hunger? Therefore the ever-living said to Moses, I will rain bread for them from the skies, and the people shall go out to collect it day by day, so that I may try if they will walk in my laws or no. But upon the 6th day they must prepare what they bring in, which shall be twice as much as the daily portion. Moses and Aaron consequently said to all the children of Israel, Tomorrow morning you shall know that the ever-living brought you out of the land of the Mitzrayim, for in the morning you shall see the power of the Lord by his listening to your complaints against the ever-living and us, regarding what you have complained against us. And, Moses continued, the ever-living will give you flesh to eat in the evening, and bread in the morning to your fill, because the ever-living has heard your complaints that you have complained against him and us. For you not only complain against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, Command all the families of the children of Israel to appear before the ever-living, for he has heard their murmurs. Consequently Aaron commanded all the families of the children of Israel, and they presented themselves in the desert, and saw the splendor of the ever-living appear in the cloud. Then the ever-living spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the complaints of the children of Israel. Speak to them and say, In the evening you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, so that you may know that I am your ever-living God. When evening arrived, therefore, quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning a layer of dew surrounded the camp. But when the layer of dew exhaled from the surface of the desert, grains like scales, grains like hoarfrost, covered the ground. When the children of Israel saw it, they said each to his brother, Man-huah, for they did not know what it was. But Moses said to them, "This is the bread which the ever-living has given for you to eat, and this is the thing that he commands. You are to collect each of you according to his requirements, a homer for each individual member of the living persons that you entertain in your tents." The children of Israel accordingly did so, and collected it from the desert, much and little. But when they measured by the homer, there was no excess to the much, or deficiency to the little. Each had according to the consuming mouths. For Moses had said to them, "Let not any remain until the morning." But some listened not to Moses, but reserved it by them until the morning, when it bred worms. Moses, however, was angry with them. Therefore they collected it morning by morning, according to the consuming mouths. For when the sun arose, it melted. But when the 6th day came, they collected a double quantity of bread, 2 homers to each. And all the heads of families came to Moses and reported it. When he replied to them, "That is what the ever-living commanded. You shall rest a holy rest to the ever-living tomorrow. What you have to bake, bake it, and what you have to boil, boil it, and all the remainder keep by you until the morning." So they laid it up until the morning, as Moses commanded, and it did not stink, and worms were not in it. Then Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a rest to the ever-living. You shall not go out into the field. You shall collect it 6 days, but the 7th day is a rest. You shall not do it then." Yet it happened that on the 7th day a man went out to collect, but he found none. The ever-living therefore said to Moses, "Until when shall I entreat them to observe my commands and laws? Let them see that the ever-living has given them the rest, for he has given to them on the 6th day bread for 2 days. Let each stay at his home. Let none go out from the camp on the 7th day." So the people stayed at home on the 7th day. Thus the house of Israel called it man, and it was like a seed of coriander, white, and the taste of it like cakes and honey. Moses also said, "This is the rule that the ever-living commands to be practiced continually, to be kept for your generations, so that you may see the bread which I caused you to eat in the desert, whilst I brought you out from the land of Mizar." Therefore Moses said to Aaron, "Take a basket, and put into it a full homer of manna, and place it before the presence of the ever-living, to preserve for their posterity." So as the ever-living commanded to Moses, Aaron laid it up in the presence, as a witness, in the treasury. And the children of Israel ate the manna for 40 years, until they came to the land to rest. They ate the manna, until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. The end of chapters 9 through 16 of the book of Exodus. Recording by Mark Penfold. The book of Exodus, chapters 17 through 24. Chapter 17. Afterwards the whole body of the children of Israel marched from the desert of Sin by stages at the command of the Lord, and encamped in exhaustion, for there was no water to quench the people's thirst. There the people contended with Moses, saying, "Give us water, and quench our thirst." Moses, however, replied, "Why do you mutiny against me? Why do you try the ever-living?" But the people thirsted then for water, and the people complained against Moses, and said, "Why did you bring us out from Mizar to kill us, with our children and cattle, with thirst?" Then Moses cried to the ever-living, saying, "What shall I do with these people? For they are ready to stone me." But the ever-living answered Moses, "Pass along before the face of the people, and take with you the magistrates of Israel. Take also in your hand the rod with which you struck the river, and march. I will stand before your face there at the rock in the waste, and you shall strike upon the rock, and water shall come out of it, and quench the people." And Moses did so in sight of the nobles of Israel, and named the spot Trial and Strife, because of the dispute with the children of Israel, and because of their trial of the ever-living, saying, "Does the ever-living exist with us or not?" The Amalekites at this time came with the Rephaites, and made war with Israel. Consequently Moses said to Joshua, "Choose your own men, and go out to fight with the Amalekites tomorrow, and I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." Joshua therefore did as Moses said to him, and fought with Amalek. But Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill, and when Moses held up his hand, Israel became victorious, but when he lowered his hand, Amalek was victor. So when the hand of Moses became weary, they took a stone and placed it under him, and he rested upon it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hand, first one and then the other, so that his hand was stretched out until sunset, when Joshua defeated Amalek and his people by the edge of the sword. The ever-living afterwards said to Moses, "Write this and record it in a book, and instruct Joshua that I will blot the memory of Amalek from under the skies." Moses then built an altar and called its name, "The Throne of the Ever-Living." And he said, "With the hand upon the throne of Jacob, fight Amalek for the Lord from age to age." Chapter 18. When Jethro, the priest of Midian, the father-in-law of Moses, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, how the ever-living had led Israel out of Mitzar, then Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, took Zipporah, the wife of Moses, who had sent her back and her 2 sons, the name of the first was Gershom, for he said, "I have been a stranger in a strange land," and the name of the other, Eleazar, "for the God of my fathers has been a comfort and refuge to me from the sword of Pharaoh." So Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, brought his 2 sons and his wife to Moses in the desert, where the mount of God is. And he said to Moses, "I, Jethro, your father-in-law, have come to you with your wife and 2 sons with me." Then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and bowed to him and kissed him, and they mutually inquired after their health. Then they came to the tent. Moses there related to his father-in-law all that the ever-living had done to Pharaoh and to the Mitzrayim on account of Israel, all the troubles which met them on the road, and how the ever-living delivered them. And Jethro was glad at all the good which the ever-living had done to Israel, and his redemption of them from the hand of the Mitzrayim. So Jethro said, "Bless the ever-living, who has delivered you from the hand of the Mitzrayim, and from the hand of Pharaoh, and who has delivered this people from under the hand of the Mitzrites. Now you can perceive how much greater the ever-living is than all their gods, by the events with which he overwhelmed them." Then Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, took burnt offerings and sacrifices to God, and Aaron and all the nobles of Israel came and dined with the father-in-law of Moses before God. The next day, however, Moses sat to administer justice to the people, and Moses remained from morning to evening. And the father-in-law of Moses saw all that he did for the people, and said, "What is this business that you do for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people standing before you from morn till night?" When Moses replied to his father-in-law, "Because all the people come to me to inquire of the ever-living. Whoever among them has a dispute comes to me, and I decide between man, and I make known the decision of God and his laws." But the father-in-law Moses answered him, "The practice that you follow is not good. You are not prudent, nor are this people who are with you. For their affairs are more than you are able to bear alone. Therefore listen to my voice. I will advise you, and God will be with you. Let now the people appear before God, and bring their affairs to God, and instruct them in the decisions of his laws, and inform them the way they should walk in, and the acts they should do. Also choose for yourself from all the people strong men who fear God and hate bribes, and place over them as chiefs of thousands, chiefs of hundreds, chiefs of 50s, and chiefs of 10s, and let them judge the people at all times. And let only all the great affairs be brought to you, but let them judge all the little matters, and thus ease yourself, for they load you. If you do this and God confirms it, then you can appoint it, and all these people can arrange their affairs with ease." Moses consequently listened to the suggestion of his father-in-law, and did all that he said. Moses therefore chose strong men from all Israel, and placed them as heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, and chiefs of hundreds, and chiefs of 10s, and they judged the people at all times in their affairs, bringing the difficult matters to Moses, but in the small affairs they decided for themselves. Moses afterwards took leave of his father-in-law, who went to his own country. Chapter 19. At the 3rd month from the coming out of the land of the Mitzrayim, on that day they came to the desert of Sinai. Then the Rephidim also marched and came to the desert of Sinai, and encamped in the desert. Israel also encamped there near the hill. Then Moses went up to God, and the ever-living called to him from the hill, saying, Say this to the house of Jacob, and inform the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Mitzrayim, and lifted you on the wings of eagles, and brought you to me. So now, if you will listen to my voice and keep my laws, then you shall be to me a peculiar people, more than all the peoples of the earth. And you shall be to me a royal priesthood, and a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to the children of Israel. Moses consequently went and assembled the nobles of the people, and set before them the whole of these promises, as the ever-living commanded. And all the people answered at once, and said, We will do all the ever-living commands. Then Moses reported the declaration of the people to the ever-living. And the ever-living replied to Moses, Now I will come to you. In a cloud of fire I will pass by. The people shall hear me talk with you, and also I will remain with you always. Then Moses reported the declaration of the people to the ever-living. When the ever-living replied to Moses, Go to the people and sanctify them today, and tomorrow, and wash their clothes, and on the 3rd day let them assemble. For on the 3rd day the ever-living will descend in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. But you shall keep the people at a distance around, by ordering, Take care that you do not go up to the hill or touch its skirts. All who touch the hill shall die. Whether a beast or a man, let them not touch it with the hand, or they shall be stoned with stones, or pierced with a dart. They shall not live who approach to ascend the hill. Consequently Moses descended from the hill to the people, and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothing. And he said, Restrain yourselves for 3 days, not to touch a woman. When the 3rd day came to the daybreak, there were voices and lightnings and a heavy cloud over the hill, and the sound of a powerful trumpet, so that all the people in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought out from the camp all the people to meet God, and stationed them below the hill. And the hill of Sinai smoked all over its surface, when the ever-living descended upon it in fire, and its smoke went up like the smoke of a smelting furnace, and the whole hill trembled greatly, and there was the continuous sound of a trumpet. But Moses very boldly spoke, and God answered him by voice. Then the ever-living descended on to the hill of Sinai, on to the top of the hill, and the ever-living called Moses to the top of the hill, and Moses ascended. Then the ever-living said to Moses, Descend at once to the people, for fear they should break through to see, and numbers fall before me. Let the priests also who sacrifice to the ever-living sanctify themselves, lest the Lord afflict them. But Moses replied to the ever-living, The people cannot ascend the hill of Sinai, for you commanded us, saying, Go a distance from the hill and sanctify yourselves. The ever-living, however, answered him, Go, descend, and return, you and Aaron with you. But the priests and the people must not attempt to ascend to the Lord, lest he afflict them. So Moses descended to the people and spoke to them. Chapter 20. Then the ever-living dictated all these commands, and said, I am your ever-living God, who brought you out from the Mitzrayim, from the house of bondage. There shall be no other God to you except myself. You shall not make for yourselves any image or likeness of anything that is in the heavens above, or that is upon the earth beneath, or that is in the waters lower than the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, your ever-living God, am a jealous God, visiting the sins of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me. But I show mercy for thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of your ever-living God in vain, for the Lord will not hold guiltless the taking of his name in vain. Remember the 7th day to keep it holy. 6 days you may labor and do all your business, but the 7th day is a rest to your ever-living God. You shall not then do any business, you or your son or your daughter, your manservant or your maidservant, or your cattle, or your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 ages the ever-living made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested at the 7th age. Therefore the ever-living blessed the 7th day and hallowed it. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land which the ever-living God will give to you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or his maidservant, or his ox, or his ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. And all the people perceived the sounds, and the flamings, and the trumpet voice, and the smoke from the mountain. So the people feared and shook in themselves, and stood at a distance, and said to Moses, You speak with us, and we can listen. But let not God speak with us, for fear we should die. Moses, however, answered to the people, Fear not, for God has come to you to try you, and to test whether you will fear him henceforward, and not sin. So the people stood afar off, but Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Then the ever-living said to Moses, Say this to the children of Israel, You have seen that from the heavens I have spoken with you. Never make for yourselves a god of silver or a god of gold. You shall not make them for yourselves. You shall make an altar of earth for me, and you shall offer upon it your sacrifices and your thank offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I record my name, I will come to you and bless you. But if you make an altar of stone to me, it shall not be of cut stones. For if you carve with a cutter upon it, then it will be polluted. And you shall not pile up pyramids for an altar, so that your nakedness may not be discovered when you go up to it. Chapter 21. Now these are the decrees which you shall put before them. A servant shall serve 6 years' servitude, and in the 7th he shall go out to freedom. If he is single, he shall go out single. If he has a wife, his wife shall go out with him. But if his master has given him a wife, and she has borne sons or daughters to him, the wife and her children which she has borne shall belong to the master, and he shall go away single. If, however, the servant says, I like my master, my wife, and my children, he shall not go into freedom, but his master shall present him to the magistrates, and station him at the door or at the doorposts, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve continuously. If a man sells his daughter to be a mother, she should not go as if going into slavery. If she is not pleasing in the eyes of her master when he has not known her, then he shall free her to her own people without a payment. He shall not have power to sell her because of his treachery to her. But if she has borne a child to him, then he shall treat her according to the law about wives. If he takes another to her, he shall not diminish her share for clothing and conjugal rights. And if a third to these, he shall not send her away destitute without money. Whoever assails a man and he dies, he shall be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait, but his stroke came from God, then you shall provide a place where he may fly. If, however, a man plans against his neighbor to murder him, then you shall take him from my altar to kill him. And whoever assaults his father or his mother, he shall be killed. Whoever steals a man and sells him, when he is caught, he shall be put to death. Whoever curses his father or mother, he shall be put to death. And when men contend, and a man assaults his neighbor with a stone or a clod, but he does not die, yet is reduced to his bed, if he recovers and can walk out upon his crutch, and he escapes from the injury except his loss of time, he shall be compensated, and the physician paid for his cure. And if a man strikes his slave or his maidservant with his stick, and he dies under his hand, they shall be avenged. Yet if these continue a day or some days, they shall not be avenged, for they were his property. And when 2 persons quarrel, and they strike a pregnant woman, and her child comes out, and mischief does not ensue, he shall be fined according to what is laid upon him to compensate the woman, and that shall be fixed by the judges. But if mischief ensues, you shall inflict life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, mark for mark, mutilation for mutilation, wound for wound, blow for blow. And if any man strikes his slave in the eye, so that his eye becomes blind, he shall let him go free instead of his eye. And if a tooth from his slave, so that the tooth is destroyed, in compensation he shall set him free instead of his tooth. And if a bullock butts a man, and the man dies, you shall stone the bullock, and not eat of its flesh, but destroy the bullock for nothing. But if the bullock were accustomed to butt formerly, and his owner knew it, and did not guard it, and it kills a man or a woman, the bullock shall be stoned, and the owner put to death. But if a fine is laid upon him, he shall pay it, and his life be free from all, because of the fine laid upon him. Whether a man or a woman is butted, it shall be done according to this decree. If a slave man or woman is butted by a bullock, 30 shekels of silver shall be given to their master, and the bullock be stoned. And if a man opens a well, or digs a well, and does not cover it, and an ox or an ass shall fall into it, because of the well he shall pay a money fine to its owner, and the dead shall be his. And if the bullock of a man gores the bullock of his neighbor, and it dies, then they shall sell the living bullock and divide the money, and they shall also divide the dead. But if its master know that the bullock gored formerly, and he did not guard it, he shall compensate with a bullock for the bullock, and the dead shall be to him. If a man steals a bullock or a sheep, and slaughters it or sells it, he shall compensate with 5 bullocks in place of the ox, or 4 sheep in place of the sheep. Chapter 22. If a thief is found breaking in, and is struck and dies, there is not blood guilt for him. If the sun was shining on him, he may redeem his blood. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for stealing. If you find his theft in his hand, as a bullock, or an ass, or sheep alive, he shall be fined by 2. If the farm or vineyard of a man is burnt, and ruffians from his village burn his farm, or part of his farm, or a part of his vineyard, it shall be compensated. If you make a fire, and it fires the bushes, and consumes the standing corn, or a homestead, or a farm, it shall be compensated from the burner to the burnt. Whoever places with his neighbor money or goods as trustee, and they are stolen upon the premises of that person, if the thief is discovered, he shall repay twice as much. If the thief is not found, then the master of the premises shall approach the house of God, and swear he has not put his hand upon the property of his neighbor. Upon anything lost, upon ox or ass or sheep or clothing or anything strayed, and shall say that as a witness to God, he brings twice as much as was lost to God. He shall recompense his neighbor double. If a man entrusts to his neighbor an ass, or ox, or sheep, or any cattle, to take care of, and it dies or is torn, or tears out of his sight, there shall be an oath to the Lord between the two, that he has not put his hand upon the property of his neighbor, and its owner shall take it, and not be compensated. But if it has been stolen from him, he shall compensate its owner. If it is torn, he shall bring the torn pieces as a proof. He shall not compensate. And if a man hires it of his neighbor, and it is broken or dies, and its owner is not with it, he shall be compensated. If its owner is with it, he shall not be compensated. If it was hired, he went for the wages. And if a man seduces a girl who has not been betrothed to him, and lies with her so that she conceives, she shall be his wife. But if her father is unwilling to give her to him, he shall pay money as a dowry for the girl. She shall not live as a slave. Whoever lies with a beast shall be put to death. No sacrifice shall be burnt to gods, except to the ever-living only. You shall not persecute or oppress foreigners, for you were foreigners in the land of the Mitzrayim. You shall not annoy any widow or orphan. If you wrong them so that they cry to me, I shall hear their cry, and my anger will burn, and I will slay you by the sword, and your own wives shall be widows, and your own children orphans. If you lend money to my people, my poor among you, you shall not be to them like a usurer. You shall not put upon them usury. If your neighbor deposits with you as a pledge a garment, at the setting of the sun you shall return it to him, for it is his only covering with which he clothes his body, in which he lies down. And it may be he will cry to me, when I will hear, for I am merciful. You shall not blaspheme God, and shall not curse the princes of your nation. You shall not delay to give to me the first produce of your farm and vineyard. You shall do the same with your cow and your sheep. It shall be 7 days with its mother, and on the 7th day you shall give it to me. As you shall be holy men to me, you shall not eat of torn flesh that has been torn in the field. You must throw it to the dogs. Chapter 23. You shall not make a false oath. You shall not set your hand to commit fraud. You shall not be a false witness. You shall not go with the powerful to do wrong, and you shall not plead for the powerful to make excuse for their wrongdoing, and you shall not turn away from the poor man when he pleads. When you meet with the cow or ass of your enemy straying, you shall take it back to him. When you see the ass of your enemy fallen under its load, and you can seize and free it for him, you shall help to free it with him. You shall not pervert justice from the destitute when he pleads. Keep far off from false pretense. You shall not kill the innocent and the righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked. And you shall not receive bribes, for bribes blind open eyes and pervert the words of the righteous. And you shall not oppress a foreigner, for you know the feelings of a foreigner, since you were foreigners in the land of the Mizraim. For 6 years you shall sow the earth and gather its produce, but in the 7th you shall manure it and spread it out, and the destitute of your people shall eat, and the rest the animals of the field shall eat. You shall do the same with your vineyards and olive plantations. 6 days you shall do all your business, but the 7th day you shall rest, so that your ox and your ass may take comfort, and your servants and foreigners refresh themselves. And all that I say to you, you shall regard, for you shall not remember a name of other gods, and it shall not be heard from your mouth. 3 times in a year you shall make a festival to me. The feast of unfermented bread you shall keep for 7 days. You shall eat biscuits, as I commanded you, at the season of the month of harvest, for in it you came out of Mizar, and you did not see my presence in vain. And you shall make the feast of the firstfruits of harvest when you sow in the field, and the feast of harvest home at the end of the year when you gather in your produce from the fields. 3 times in the year all your men shall come before me, the Almighty Lord. You shall not sacrifice with fermented bread a blood sacrifice to me, and the fat of my feast shall not be kept till the morning. The best of the firstfruits of your ground you shall bring to the hand of your ever-living God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Then I will send my messenger before your face to guard you in your way, and to bring you to the place where I will fix you. Regard his presence, and listen to his voice. Grieve him not, that he may not rise to punish you, for my power is around him. But if you listen to his voice, and do all that I shall command, then I will love you, but I will distress your distressors. For my messenger shall march before you, and bring you to the Amorites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and destroy them. You shall not worship their gods, and not serve them, and you shall not make like them, but you shall destroy, and you shall break their pillars. And you shall serve your ever-living God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and will turn war away from around you. You shall not be childless and sterile in your land. You shall fulfill your days. I will send my terror before your face, and will terrify every nation when you arrive at them. And I will make all your enemies to turn their back to you. And I will send the destroyer before you, and drive out the Hittites, and the Canaanites, and the Hivites from before your approach. I will not drive them away in a year from before you, lest the earth should become waste, and the beasts of the field should increase upon you. I will drive them out little by little before you, until you multiply and can inherit the country. And your 2 boundaries shall be from the Sea of Weeds at the Sea of Philistia, through the desert to the river, which I will give to your hand, and I will drive the inhabitants of the country from before you. You shall not make a treaty with them, or a covenant with their gods. They shall not reside in your land, for fear they would cause you to sin against me, so that you would serve their gods. For I am the ever-living, for you to reverence. Chapter 24. Then it was commanded to Moses, Go up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the princes of Israel, and let them worship at a distance. But Moses shall approach alone to the ever-living, for they must not approach, nor the people go up with him. So Moses went and reported to the people the whole of the commands of the ever-living, and the whole of his decrees. When all the people answered with one voice, and said, All the commands which the ever-living commands we will do. Moses afterwards wrote down all the commands of the Lord, and arose in the morning, and built an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he commissioned representatives of the children of Israel, who went out and offered burnt offerings, and sacrificed peace offerings to the ever-living. Moses also took part of the blood, and put it in basins, and part of the blood he sprinkled upon the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant, and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, All that the ever-living has commanded, we will do and listen to. Moses consequently took the blood and sprinkled it upon the people, and said, This is the blood of the covenant which the ever-living has settled with you in all these commands. Afterwards Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 princes of Israel went up, and saw the God of Israel. And under his feet was like the dazzle of sapphire stones, and the splendor of the clear sun. But upon the nobles of the children of Israel he did not extend his hand. They, however, gazed upon God, and they ate and drank. Then the ever-living said to Moses, Come up to the mountain to me, and stay there, and I will give you stone slabs with the laws and commandments which I have written for your instruction. Therefore Moses arose with Joshua his attendant, and Moses went up the mount to God. But the princes said, Let us remain here until you return to us, and also Aaron and Hur with us. Why should the words of the ever-living come to us? Consequently Moses ascended the hill, and a cloud covered the hill, and the splendor of the ever-living rested upon the hill of Sinai. And the cloud covered it 6 days. Then he called to Moses on the 7th day out of the cloud, and the glory of the ever-living appeared like a consuming fire on the head of the mountain to the eyes of the children of Israel. Moses therefore went into the midst of the cloud, and ascended the hill. And Moses was upon the hill 40 days and 40 nights. The end of chapters 17 through 24 of the book of Exodus. Recording by Mark Penfold. The book of Exodus, chapters 25 through 32. Chapter 25. There the ever-living spoke to Moses, and said, Tell the children of Israel that they must bring offerings to me. From anything their heart induces them they may offer, and these are the offerings they may offer for themselves: gold, silver, and brass, and blue, and purple, and scarlet, and red, spun goat's hair, and red ram skins, and badger's skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light for the lamps, with oil to anoint, and incense to perfume, and make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell amongst them. Exactly according to the pattern I have shown you, you shall form the dwelling, and form all its furniture. Thus you shall make it. You shall also make an ark of acacia wood, of 2 cubits and a half long, and 2 cubits and a half breadth, and 1 cubit and a half high. And you shall plate it with pure gold inside and out, and wreathe and make a border of gold around it. You shall also cast rings of pure gold, and place on the 4 corners of it, that is, 2 rings on one side of it, and 2 rings on the other side of it. And you shall make staves of acacia wood, and plate them with gold, and put the staves into the rings on the sides of the ark, to carry the ark by them. The staves shall remain in the rings, they shall not be removed from them. You shall then put into the ark the evidences that I will give to you. You shall also make a cover of pure gold of 2 cubits in length, and 1 cubit and a half in breadth. You shall besides make 2 covers of gold, shaped as dishes, in 2 divisions for the covers. Make the cases thus: 1 for each side, and a cherub for that division of the cover. You shall make it with cherubim upon the 2 divisions. Thus the cherubim will be stretching their wings, as overshadowing the covers with their wings, with the wings of each towards his brother, over the covers. The cherubim shall be face to face. Then you shall place the covers upon the top of the ark, and you shall put into the ark the evidences that I will give to you. Then I will instruct you there, and I will speak to you from off the covers, from between the two cherubim, which are upon the ark, all that I command you for the children of Israel. You shall also make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, and a cubit broad, and a cubit and a half high, and plate it with pure gold, and make a border of gold around it. Construct thus a border like a coping around it, and make points of gold upon the surrounding border. Also make for it 4 staves of gold, and put the staves in the 4 sockets which are above the legs. These 4 sockets shall be above the border for the staves to carry the table by. So you shall make the staves of acacia wood, and plate them with gold to carry the table. You shall also make dishes, and spoons, and bowls, and the cups in which the wine is, of pure gold, and place upon the table the shewbread before me continually. You shall also make lamps of pure gold. Make the lamp with spreading branches, with a stalk rising upwards like a blossom, with a bowl on it. Let there be 6 stalks going from the sides of it. 3 stalks for lamps on one side of it, and 3 stalks for lamps on the other side of it. 3 knobs with almonds on each stalk, a flower and a bowl, the same for each of the 3 stalks that are provided for the lamps, and for the 4th lamp a knob with an almond, a knob and a bowl, and a knob under 2 of the stalks between them, and a knob under 2 of the stalks between them, and a knob under 2 of the stalks between them, for the 6 branches that come from the lamp. The knobs and the stalks between them shall be, all of them, each one, turned from pure gold. You shall also make 7 reflectors to throw the light in front of themselves, and dishes and snuffers of pure gold. You shall use a talent of pure gold for it, and all its instruments. And be careful to make them according to the pattern I showed you on the mountain. Chapter 26. You shall also make for the tent 10 curtains of twisted linen, and azure, purple, and blue, ornamented artistically with 2 cherubs. The width of each curtain shall be 18 cubits, and the height of it 4 cubits. The extent of each curtain shall be the same to all the curtains. 2 curtains shall be attached one to the other, and 5 curtains attached one to the other. You shall also make loops of azure on the edge of each of the curtains in the selvage to join them, and make the same in the selvage of the 2 curtains to join them. Make 5 loops to each curtain. Thus make 5 loops on the selvage of the 2 curtains that are joined by the opposite loops to the first one. And make 5 golden hooks to unite the curtains, each to the other by hooks, so that they may be one tent. Also make curtains of goat skin as a covering for the first tent. Make 11 curtains of them. The length of the first curtain to be 30 cubits, and the breadth 4 cubits. Make each one of the 11 curtains the same. Then join 5 of the curtains together, and 6 curtains together, for the doublings of the 6th curtain in the front of the tent. You shall also make 50 loops upon the edge of the first curtain, upon the selvage at the juncture, and 50 loops upon the edge of the second curtain. And make hoops for the loops, and unite them for the pavilion, and let it be one. But part of the curtains must hang down from the roof of the pavilion. Half the curtains of the roof you shall hang over the back part of the tent, with a cubit on this side and a cubit on that side, for the fold in the length of the curtains of the pavilion shall hang down over the sides of the tent on this side and that side, to conceal it. You shall in addition make a covering to the tent of red ram skins, and a covering of skins of badgers all over it. You also make the boards of the sanctuary of acacia wood, planed. 10 cubits the length of each board, and a cubit and a half the breadth of each plank. You shall set clasps upon the first plank at the edges of each of its counterparts. You shall do the same to all the planks of the sanctuary. And make the planks for the sanctuary 20 planks for the face to the right, with 40 sockets of silver to fix under the 20 planks, 2 sockets under each plank to fix the clutches into. And upon the second side of the sanctuary, to face the north, 20 planks, and 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under each plank, and 2 clutches under each plank. And to the breadth of the sanctuary westward you shall make 6 planks, with 2 planks made for a corner of the sanctuary at its lengths. And there shall be rings to fasten them. For the one shall have a ring on the top of it to meet the ring of the other. This shall be for the 2 corners. That is 8 planks, with their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 sockets for each plank. Make also crossbars of acacia wood, 5 to a plank at one side of the sanctuary, and 5 crossbars for the second side of the sanctuary, and 5 crossbars to the planks at the side of the sanctuary stretching west. And fix the crossbars in the middle of the planks, with bolts from one junction to the other junction. And overlay the planks and their rings with gold. Make also of gold rests for the crossbars, and plate the crossbars with gold, and erect the sanctuary according to the plan I showed you in the mount. Make besides a veil of azure, and purple and blue, and red, and twisted linen. Ornament it with an embroidery of cherubim, and place it upon 4 supports of acacia, overlaid with gold, with pins of gold, upon 4 sockets of silver. And hang the veil below the hooks, and bring there within the veil to the Holy of Holies the ark of the witnesses. Then put the covers upon the ark in the Holy of Holies, and place the table outside the veil, and put the lamp upon the table at the south side of the sanctuary, and place the table towards the north side. Then make a screen for the door of the tent, of azure and purple and blue, and have it embroidered with spun flax. Also make 5 standards of acacia for the screen, and plate them with gold, and have pins of gold, and cast for them 5 sockets of brass. Chapter 27. Make besides an altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits broad. The altar shall be square, and its height 3 cubits. And make horns to it upon its 4 sides. The horns shall project from it. You shall also sheathe it in brass. And make buckets for the ashes, and shovels, and brushes, and tongs. Make all its instruments of brass. Make also a net like a lattice of brass, and form on the network 4 projections of brass on its 4 corners, and fix it below the fireplace of the altar by its projections, so that the grating may be in the center of the altar. Make also staves for the altar, staves of acacia wood, and plate them with brass, so that the staves may go into projections, and let the staves be upon the 2 sides of the altar, to carry it by. Make it with hollow panels, such as were shown to you in the mountain. You shall make them the same. Make the court of the sanctuary to face towards the south. The curtains of the court of spun linen, 100 cubits in length on one face, with 20 standards, and 20 sockets of brass, with spikes to the standards, and hooks of silver. And then on the length of the north side 100 cubits of curtains, and 20 standards, with their 20 sockets of brass, with spikes for the standards, and hooks of silver. Let the breadth of the court to face the west be 50 cubits of curtains, 10 standards, and 10 sockets. And the breadth of the court to face the east, towards the sunrise, 50 cubits, with 15 cubits of curtains to the gateway, with 3 standards and 3 sockets. And from the other shoulder 15 cubits with 3 standards and 3 sockets. But for the gate of the court, let there be a mask of 20 cubits, made of azure, and purple, and crimson, and blue, and red, and embroidered spun linen, with 4 standards and 4 sockets. All the standards around the court shall have silver connecting rods and pins of silver, and sockets of brass. The length of the court 100 cubits, and the breadth 50 by 50. And the height 5 cubits of spun linen with standards of brass, with all the furniture of the sanctuary, and all the service, and all its nails, and all the nails of the court of brass. You shall further command the children of Israel that they must bring to you pure pressed olive oil for the lamps, for a continual offering in the pavilion of the testimony, outside the veil which is over the evidences, providing it for Aaron and his sons to serve till the morning before the ever-living, as an everlasting institution for their descendants among the children of Israel. Chapter 28. And you shall separate to yourself Aaron your brother and his sons with him from among the children of Israel, to be priests to me. Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron. Also make sacred robes for Aaron your brother, to honor and beautify him. And speak to all the skillful-minded, who have a skillful intellect, that they should make those robes for Aaron, to consecrate him as a priest to me. And these are the robes which they shall make: a breastplate, and ephod, and a cloak, and a cape of embroidery, with a turban and girdle. These are the sacred robes to be made for Aaron your brother, and for his sons, as priest to me. They must also bring gold and azure, and purple and blue and red and thread. Make the ephod of gold, azure, purple, blue, red, and spun linen embroidery. The 2 shoulder pieces shall be joined to it on the 2 sides, and fastened. And the embroidery which they work upon the ephod shall be of gold, azure, and purple, and blue, red, and spun flax. Then you shall take 2 onyx stones, and engrave upon them the names of the sons of Israel, 6 of their names upon 1 stone, and the names of the other 6 of them upon the 2nd stone, in order of their birth. You shall make the engraving like a seal. Having engraved the 2 stones with the names of the sons of Israel, you shall cause them to be surrounded with settings of gold. And set the 2 stones upon the 2 shoulders of the ephod, as stones of remembrance for the sons of Israel. And Aaron shall carry their names before the ever-living upon his 2 shoulders, for a remembrance. Make as well settings of gold, and 2 chains of pure gold. Make them with edgings, as a wreath is made, and fix the chains on to the settings. Also make a breastplate of justice, of embroidery like the ephod. Make it of gold, azure, and purple, and blue, red, and spun linen combined. It shall be square, a double span long, and a span wide, with settings in it, a setting of 4 stones in a row: a ruby, a topaz, and a diamond for the 1st row; the 2nd row, an emerald, a sapphire, a jasper; the 3rd row, a ligure, an agate, and an amethyst; the 4th row, an amber, an onyx, and pearl. They shall be in settings of gold with their fastenings. And the stones shall have the names of the 12 sons of Israel, their names engraven like a seal. Each shall have 1 name of the 12 tribes. Also make for the breastplate linked chains of pure gold, as a wreath. Also make for the breastplate 2 buttons of gold, and fix the 2 buttons on the 2 edges of the breastplate, and fix the 2 wreaths of gold upon the 2 buttons at the edges of the breastplate. And the 2 ends of the 2 wreaths you shall fasten on to the 2 settings, and put them upon the shoulders of the ephod, upon its front face. Also make 2 buttons of gold, and place them on the 2 sides of the breastplate, upon its edges, where the ephod turns over to its inside. Besides, you shall make buttons of gold, and fix them upon the 2 shoulders of the ephod, extending from the top of it to the juncture at the top of the girdle of the ephod, and shall bind on the breastplate by its button to the hook of the ephod, so that the breastplate shall not fall off from the ephod. Thus Aaron will carry the names of the sons of Israel upon the breastplate of justice, upon his heart, when he goes to the sanctuary, as a remembrance before God continually. Also fix onto the breastplate the Urim and Thummim, so that they may be over the heart of Aaron when he goes before the ever-living, and Aaron shall carry justice for the children of Israel before the ever-living continually. Also make for the cape of the ephod loops of azure, and let there be eyelets at the middle of the edge, at the seam around it, made like the weaving for the eyelets of a coat of mail, so as not to tear away. Also make upon the hem pomegranates of azure, and purple, and blue, and red on the hems around, and bells of gold beside them around, a bell of gold and a pomegranate upon the hem of the cape around. And they shall be upon Aaron when ministering, so that their sound may be heard at his going into the sanctuary before the ever-living, and coming from him, so that he may not die. Make also a flower of pure gold, and engrave upon it like the engraving of a seal, Holiness to the Lord, and fasten to it an azure cord, that it may be held upon the turban, in the front of the turban, and be above the brow of Aaron, so that Aaron may carry their weaknesses to the sanctuaries when he sanctifies the children of Israel, sanctifying them with every offering. So it shall be above his brow continually, to bring favor to them from the ever-living. Also embroider a robe of white linen, and make a turban of white linen, and make an embroidered sash. Also make robes for the sons of Aaron, and make for them sashes, and make them mitres to honor and adorn them. And clothe with them Aaron your brother, and his sons with them. Then consecrate them, and put a ring on their hands, and sanctify them, and they shall be my priests. Also make drawers for their legs, to cover their naked body from the waist, and to extend down the thighs. These shall be worn by Aaron and his sons when they go into the tent of the congregation, or to clothe them at the altar, when serving religion, so that they may not excite passion and die. This is a perpetual order to him and his descendants after him. Chapter 29. And these are the things you shall use in consecrating them to be priests to me. You shall take an heifer from the cows, and 2 perfect rams, and unfermented bread, and unfermented cakes mixed with oil, and then unfermented wafers buttered with oil, which you shall make of wheaten flour, and put them in a basket, and offer them in the basket with the heifer and the 2 rams. Then Aaron and his sons shall approach the door of the hall of assembly, and you shall wash them with water. Next you shall take the garments and clothe Aaron with the robe, and the cape of the ephod, and the breastplate, and you shall invest him with the adjuncts of the ephod. Then you shall place the turban upon his head, and the crown of righteousness upon the turban. Afterwards take the oil of consecration and pour it upon his head, and consecrate him. Then bring forward his sons, and clothe them with their robes, and gird Aaron and his sons with the sashes, and bind the mitres on them, which shall indicate the priesthood as a perpetual institution. Appoint Aaron, and appoint his sons in this manner. Next you shall bring forward the heifer before the hall of assembly, and Aaron and his sons shall strike their hands upon the head of the heifer. Then slay the heifer before the ever-living at the door of the hall of assembly, and take of the blood of the heifer, and put upon the horns of the altar with your finger, and the rest of the blood pour out at the foundation of the altar. Then take all the fat of the caul of the bowels, and the caul over the liver, and 2 kidneys, and the fat which is about them, and burn them before the altar. But the flesh of the heifer, and its skin, and the dung you shall burn with fire outside the camp as a sin offering. Then you shall take one of the rams, and Aaron and his sons shall strike their hands upon the head of the ram. Afterwards slay the ram, and take its blood, and sprinkle upon the altar all round. But divide the ram into portions, and wash its entrails and its legs, and lay them upon the portions with its head, and burn all the ram upon the altar. It is a whole burnt offering to the ever-living. It is a sweet odor to the ever-living. Afterwards take the 2nd ram, and let Aaron and his sons strike their hands upon the head of the ram. Then slay the ram, and take some of its blood, and put upon the tip of the right ear of Aaron, and on the tip of the ears of his sons, and upon the thumb of their right hands, and upon the great toe of their feet, and sprinkle the blood all around the altar. Next, take some of the blood which is upon the altar, and some of the oil of consecration, and sprinkle upon Aaron, and upon his robes, and upon his sons, and upon their robes with him, and sanctify him and his robes, and his sons, and their robes as well. Afterwards take from the ram the fat, and the suet, and the fat of the caul of the bowels, and the lobe of the liver, and the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is over them, for it is a ram of consecration, and 1 round loaf of bread, and 1 loaf buttered with oil, and 1 thin cake from the basket of unfermented cakes that are before the ever-living, and place the whole on the hands of Aaron and the hands of his sons, and they shall wave them before the ever-living. Then take them from their hands, and burn with incense upon the altar for a whole offering, as a sweet smell before the ever-living. They shall be for the ever-living. Next take the breast of the ram of consecration which was for Aaron, and you yourself shall wave it before the ever-living, and it shall be to yourself for a portion. And sanctify the breast of the wave offering, and the legs of the wave offerings which were raised up from the ram of consecration, which was for Aaron and for his sons, and they shall be for Aaron and his sons to take always from the children of Israel, a sacrifice of thanks. You shall raise them to the ever-living. And the sacred robes that are for Aaron shall be for his sons after him to be consecrated in, and to serve with their hands in them. The priests from his sons after him, who come to the hall of assembly for the holy service, shall be clothed in them 7 days. Next take the ram of consecration and boil its flesh in the holy place, and Aaron and his sons shall eat the flesh of the ram and the bread which was in the basket at the door of the hall of assembly. They shall eat it as a protection to them in the work of their hands, in the sanctuary alone. And a stranger shall not eat that holy thing with them. But if there remains any of the flesh of the consecration, or of the bread until the morning, you shall burn the remnants by fire. They shall not be eaten, because they are holy. Do this with Aaron and his sons, exactly as I have commanded. Thus for 7 days you shall fill their hands, and offer a bullock for a sin offering daily, as a protection for them, with a sin offering upon the altar to protect yourself. And you shall consecrate it to sanctify it. You shall protect for the altar 7 days, and sanctify it. Then the altar shall be holy of holies. All approaching to the altar shall be sacred. This is what you shall offer daily upon the altar: 2 lambs of a year old continually. Offer the first ram in the morning, and offer the second lamb between the dusks, with 1/10 of flour mixed with 1/4 of a hin of olive oil, and 1/4 of a hin of wine with the first lamb, as a drink offering. And offer the second lamb between the dusks, like the offering in the morning, and offer a similar drink offering with it, a sweetmeat to the ever-living, as continuous offerings from your posterity before the ever-living at the door of the hall of assembly, at the place he indicates to you, where he will speak to you. For I will show myself to the children of Israel, and will sanctify them by my majesty. Thus you shall sanctify the hall of assembly and the altar for me, but I will sanctify Aaron and his sons to myself as priests, and I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel, and be their God, and they shall know that I am the ever-living, the God who brought them from the land of the Mitzrayim, and dwell in the midst of them. I am the ever-living God. Chapter 30. Make also an altar for incense of acacia wood. It shall be square, 1 cubit long and 1 cubit wide, and 2 cubits high from the base of it. And you shall plate it with pure gold, its top and its sides all round, and round its top make battlements of gold. You shall also make 2 projections of gold on it, below the battlements. Make also 2 golden rings below the battlements. You shall form them upon both sides, as sockets for 2 staves to carry it by. Make the staves of acacia wood, and plate them with gold. And place it before the veils which are over the ark of the witnesses, before the veils which are over the witnesses that give evidence to you there. And Aaron shall offer incense of spices upon it evening by evening. He shall burn the incense at the lighting of the lamps. When Aaron's sons light the lamps between the dusks, he shall burn the incense perpetually before the ever-living among your descendants. You shall not offer upon it scattered incense, or whole burnt offerings or gifts, nor shall you pour a drink offering upon it, but Aaron shall expiate once a year upon its horns with blood. He shall expiate upon it with a sin offering of expiations once in a year, for your descendants. It is the holy of holies to the ever-living. Afterwards the ever-living spoke to Moses, saying, When you take a conscription of the children of Israel, to regiment them, then each shall give an expiation for his life to the ever-living for conscripting them, so that the Lord may not punish them for conscripting. This is the offering for every one passing to the conscription: 1/2 shekel by the sacred shekel, 12 gerahs to the shekel. You shall offer 1/2 shekel to the ever-living. Every one passing to the conscription from the age of 20 years old and upwards shall give this offering to the ever-living. The rich shall not add, and the poor shall not diminish from the 1/2 shekel, given as an offering to the ever-living, as a protection for their lives. And you shall take the protection money from the children of Israel, and give it to the workers in the hall of assembly, and it shall be as a remembrance for the children of Israel before the ever-living, to protect their lives. Another time the ever-living spoke to Moses, saying, Make a bath of brass, with a base of brass, for washing, and place it between the hall of assembly and the altar, and put water in it, and Aaron and his sons shall bathe themselves in it, both their hands and their feet. Upon coming into the hall of assembly, they shall wash with water, so that they may not die, when they approach the altar, to offer sweet perfumes to the ever-living. They shall wash their hands and their feet, so that they may not die. And this shall be a perpetual order to him and to his descendants in their generations. Again the ever-living spoke to Moses, saying, Now take to you perfumes, of heads of flowering myrrh 500, of sweet cinnamon 125, and of sweet cane 125, of sweet cassia 500 shekels weighed by the sacred shekel, and a hin of olive oil, and make from them the holy consecrating oil, a compound of compounds. It shall be a perfumed holy consecrating oil, to consecrate the hall of assembly and the ark of witnesses, and the table and all its instruments of the altar, and its furniture, and the altar of incense, and the altar of burnt offering and all its furniture, and the bath and its appliances. Consecrate them thus, and they shall be holy. Consecrate Aaron and his sons also. Consecrate them to be priests to me. Then you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, This is the holy oil of consecration to me in all your generations. It shall not be poured upon a man's body, nor shall you make any of similar ingredients. It is holy of holies for you to the ever-living. The man who compounds like it, and whoever puts it upon a foreigner, shall be excommunicated from his people. The ever-living also said to Moses, Take to yourself sweet drops, and scented shell, and sweet galbanum, and pure frankincense of equal weights, and make of them a sweet compound, seasoned with pure holy salt, and pound it very fine. Lay some of it before the witnesses in the hall of assembly, where I will meet you. It shall be holy of holies for you. And this perfume that you make by weight they shall not use for themselves. It is sacred to you and the ever-living. The man who uses it as a personal perfume shall be excommunicated from his people. Chapter 31. The ever-living also spoke to Moses, saying, See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hor, of the tribe of Judah. I have also filled him with a divine spirit of skill, and understanding, and knowledge, and with constructive ability, and with inventive genius to work in gold, and silver, and brass, and to cut stone for all works, and to cut timber to work for any purpose. I have also given him Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, and I have endowed him also with intelligence and science, so that they may construct all I have commanded you. The hall of assembly, and the ark of witnesses, and the covers which are upon it, and all the furniture of the tabernacle, with the table and its appurtenances, and the lamps of purity, and all their appliances, and the altar of incense, and the altar of burnt offerings, and all its furniture, with the bath and its bases, and the robes for service, and the sacred robes of Aaron the priest, and the robes of his sons to officiate in, besides the oil of consecration and the sweet perfumes, to sanctify all as I commanded you. Afterwards the ever-living spoke to Moses, saying, Now speak to the children of Israel, and say, Take care and keep my Sabbaths, for they are a witness between you and me in your generations, that I am the ever-living who sanctifies you. Therefore you shall keep the rest, for it is sacred to you. Whoever curses it, he shall die, and whoever does work in it, that person shall be excommunicated from the community of his people. You may do your business upon 6 days, but on the 7th is the day of rest. It is a holy rest to the ever-living. All who do business upon the day of rest shall die. The children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to make a rest for their posterity, as an everlasting covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 ages the ever-living made the solar system and the earth, but upon the 7th age he rested and refreshed. Then he gave to Moses, when he had finished his commands to him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tablets of stone, with the evidence written by the finger of God. Chapter 32. When the people saw that Moses delayed to descend from the mountain, they called upon Aaron, and said to him, Rouse up and make for us gods who may go before us. For as for this fellow Moses, who brought us up out of the land of the Mizraim, we know not what has become of him. Then Aaron replied to them, Pull off the earrings of gold that are in the ears of your wives, sons, and daughters, and bring them to me. All the people pulled off the rings of gold which were in their ears, and brought them to Aaron, and he took them from their hands, and modelled for it with a tool, and made a calf by casting, and said,
Israel, these are your gods who brought you up out of the land of the Mizraim.
Then Aaron paid it reverence and built an altar before it. Aaron also proclaimed and said,
A feast to the power tomorrow.
So they arose early on the morrow and offered sacrifices and presented thank offerings. Then the people sat down to eat and drink, and got up to play. The Lord, however, said to Moses, Go, descend, for your people whom you led out of Mitzrayim have corrupted themselves. They have soon turned from the path which I commanded them. They have made for themselves a cast metal calf, and they are worshipping it. And they sacrifice to it and say, This is your God, Israel, that brought you up from the land of the Mizraim. And the Lord said to Moses, I fear for this people, for it is a people of stiff neck. So now let me alone, and my anger will burn against them, and consume them, and I will make from you a great nation. But Moses fell upon his face before his ever-living God, and said, Why, Lord, should your anger burn against your people, whom you have brought up out of the land of the Mizraim with great power, and with a strong arm? Why should the Mizrahites say, He brought them out for evil, to kill them among the mountains, and to exterminate them from the face of the earth? Turn away your anger and forgive your people. Remember Abraham and Isaac and Israel your servants, what you swore to them by yourself, and promised them that their race should be as numerous as the stars of heaven. And also of this land which you promised to give to their descendants, to inherit forever. So the ever-living had compassion upon the sin which his people had done against him. Then Moses turned and descended from the hill with the 2 tables of the law in his hands, both tablets written upon both sides with writing. And God had made those tablets, and God wrote the writing that was engraved upon the tablets. When Joshua heard the voice of the people at Sin, he said to Moses, There is the sound of war in the camp. But he replied, It is not the sound of contention with swords, nor is it the sound of contention in charging that I hear the roar of. And when they approached the camp, and saw the calf and the dancing, then the anger of Moses burnt, and he flung the 2 tablets from his hands, and broke them under the mountain. He afterwards took the calf which they had made, and burnt it in the fire, and ground it until it was like dust, and threw it upon the face of the water, and made the children of Israel drink it. Then Moses demanded of Aaron, What have this people done to you, that you should bring upon them this great sin? But Aaron replied, Let not my prince's anger burn. You know this people, how bad they are, and they said to me, Make gods for us who can go before us. For as for this fellow Moses who brought us up from the land of the Mizraim, we know not what has become of him. So I said to them, Bring me gold. And they brought it, and gave me it, and I threw it into the furnace, and this calf was produced. Then Moses saw that the people were in revolt, and had involved Aaron in their insurrection. Therefore Moses stood up at the gate of the camp, and cried, Who is for my ever-living God? When all the sons of Levi joined him. And he said to them, Thus says the ever-living, the God of Israel, Let every man bind his sword upon his thigh, go through and return from gate to gate of the camp, and kill every man his brother, and every man his neighbor, and every man his friend. So the sons of Levi did it as Moses commanded. And there fell of the people in that day 3,000 men. Moses afterwards said, Your hands today have worked for the ever-living. Thus each man has gained for himself a blessing through his son and through his brother. Some days afterwards, however, Moses said to the people themselves, You have sinned a great sin. So now I will offer to the ever-living a ram as an expiation on account of your sin. Therefore Moses turned to the ever-living and said, Certainly, this people have sinned a great sin, when they made a god of gold for themselves. But yet remove their sin, and if not, strike me out of your book which you have written. Then the ever-living answered Moses, What is their sin to me? I will strike them from my book. But now go, lead the people to where I command you, and my messenger shall go before your face, and in the day of visitation I will visit upon them their sin. Thus the ever-living punished the people for what they had done regarding the calf that Aaron had made. The end of chapters 25 through 32 of the book of Exodus. Recording by Mark Penfold. The book of Exodus, chapters 33 through 40. Chapter 33. Then the ever-living said to Moses, Go from here, you and the people whom you brought up from the land of the Mitzrayim to the land which I promised to Abraham, and to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, To your descendants I will give it. And I will send my messenger before your face, and drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, from the land flowing with milk and honey. Yet I shall not bring you straight to it, for you are a stiff-necked people, therefore I shall march you by a journey. When the people heard this hard command, they grieved, and many men would not put on their armor. Therefore the ever-living spoke to Moses, Say to the children of Israel, You are a stiff-necked people, a rebellious one. If I came a single moment into your midst, I could destroy you. However, strip off your arms, and I will make known what I will do to you. So the children of Israel quickly stripped off their armor. Then Moses seized the tabernacle and pitched it for himself outside the camp, at a distance from the camp, and named it his hall of meeting, so that all who wished to inquire of the ever-living were obliged to come to him to his hall of assembly that was outside the camp. But when Moses had gone away with the tabernacle, all the people rose in insurrection, and every man stood at the door of his tent and looked after Moses as he went off with the tabernacle. And when Moses went with the tabernacle, the cloud tremblingly descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the word was with Moses. When all the people saw the trembling cloud standing at the door of his tabernacle, then all the people arose, and every one bowed down towards that tent. There the ever-living spoke with Moses face to face, as a man speaks with his friend. Then he turned towards the camp and watched it. But Joshua the son of Nun, his attendant, did not depart from the inside of the tabernacle. And Moses said to the ever-living, See, you spoke to me to bring up this people, but yet you have not instructed me as to whom you will send with me. You have, however, said, I know you by name, and you have found favor in my eyes. So now, if I have found favor in your eyes, teach me your path, that I may know you, since I have found favor in your sight, and perceive that your people are this nation. Then he replied, Turn their advance back, and I will support you. But he answered to him, If your presence is not with our marches, do not take us from here. And by what can it be possibly known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Would it not be by your marching with us, and distinguishing me and your people from every nation upon the face of the earth? Then the ever-living answered Moses, I will grant also this request which you have made, for you have found favor in my eyes, and I have made myself known to you by a name. He therefore replied, Show me, I pray, your majesty. And he was answered, I have passed all my beauty before your face, and I made myself known to you openly by my name of the ever-living. I show favor to those I love, and compassion to those I compassionate. But, he added, you are not able to see my face, for no man can see me and live. However, said the ever-living, mount up to me and sit on the rock, and my majesty shall pass over, and I will place you in a cleft of the rock, and shade you with my hand over you, until I pass over, so that upon removing my hand you may see my back, for you cannot look upon my face. Chapter 34. The ever-living afterwards said to Moses, Cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone, like the former ones, and I will write upon them the commandments which were upon the first that you broke. And when dawn comes, go up at dawn to the Mount Sinai, and sit with me upon the top of the hill. But no man shall come up with you, for no man must be seen in all the hill, nor sheep or beast approach to the hill. Moses accordingly cut 2 tablets of stone like the former, and arose at morning, and ascended Mount Sinai, as the ever-living commanded him, and took in his hands the 2 tablets of stone. Then the ever-living descended in the cloud, and sat there with him. And he called on the name of Jehovah, when the ever-living passed over before his face, and he cried out, Ever-living, living God of gentleness and pity, slow to anger but great in mercy and truth, preserving mercy to thousands, taking away passion and rebellion, and forgiving sin, but not ceasing to visit the passions of the fathers upon their children, and upon the children of their children, to the third and the fourth generation. Then Moses hastily rose and fell to the earth and worshipped, and said, If now I have found favor in your sight, Almighty, come, I pray, Almighty, near to us, for they are a stiff-necked people, and pardon our passions and sins, and give us our inheritance. And he replied, Now I make a covenant with all your people. I will produce wonders such as have not been from creation in all the earth or in any nation. And every people among whom you are shall see the work of the ever-living, for what I will do by you will be splendid. Attend to what I have communicated to you today. Then I will drive before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and Jebusites. Keep yourselves from making treaties with the residents of the land when you come to it, for fear they should be a snare in your midst. Therefore overthrow their altars, and break down their pillars, and cut down their shrines. For you shall not worship another god, for the ever-living is jealous of his name. He is a jealous God. Beware of making alliances with the inhabitants of the land, for fear you whore after their gods, and sacrifice to their gods, and approach to eat at their altars, or take from their daughters for your sons, for their daughters will whore after their gods, and your sons whore after their gods. Nor shall you make a metallic god for yourselves. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread for 7 days. You shall eat biscuits, as I have commanded you, at the assembly in the harvest month. For in the month of harvest I brought you from among the Mitzrayim. All breaking the womb is mine, and every male of your possessions, of cattle or sheep, bursting it. But an ass bursting it you shall redeem with a sheep, and if you do not redeem it, you shall break its neck. All your eldest sons you shall redeem, for you shall not see my presence empty-handed. You shall labor 6 days, but on the 7th you shall cease from plowing, and rest in harvest. You shall also make a festival of rest for yourselves at the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and a festival at the completion of the solar circuit of the year. 3 times in a year all your men shall appear before the presence of the Lord, the ever-living God of Israel, for I will drive out the heathen before you, and will extend your boundaries. Therefore no man of your land shall neglect to go up 3 times in a year to see the presence of your ever-living God. You shall not shed the blood of my sacrifices away from it, and you shall not leave until the morning the sacrifice of the Passover. You shall also decorate the house of your ever-living God with the first fruits of your fields when you come up. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Finally the ever-living said to Moses, Write these commands, for upon the basis of these commands I have made a covenant with you and with Israel. And he was there with the ever-living 40 days and 40 nights, and ate no bread nor drank water, but wrote upon the tablets the commands of the covenant, the 10 commandments. Then Moses descended from Mount Sinai with the tables of the testimony in the hands of Moses. On his descent, however, from the hill, Moses did not know that blinding rays of light from his face prevented their speaking to him. But Aaron and all the children of Israel saw those rays of light from his face, and they were afraid to approach him. Moses, however, called to them when Aaron turned to him with all the leaders of the assembly, and Moses addressed them. And after that all the children of Israel approached, and he communicated all that the ever-living had commanded him in Mount Sinai. But that Moses might speak to them, he put a veil over his face. But when Moses went to speak with the ever-living, he removed the veil from his face until he returned, and came and related to them what he had been commanded. So the children of Israel feared in the presence of Moses, for rays of splendor preceded Moses. Therefore Moses placed the veil over his face when he went to speak with them. Chapter 35. Then Moses assembled all the parliament of the children of Israel, and said to them, These are the commandments which the ever-living has commanded you to practice. You shall do your work for 6 days, but the 7th day shall be a holy rest for you. You shall rest to the ever-living. Every one doing business on it shall die. No man shall labor in all your habitations upon the day of rest. Moses continued to speak to all the parliament of the children of Israel, saying, This is also a commandment which the ever-living commanded, saying, Let every one of willing heart bring an offering from themselves to the ever-living. All of free heart consequently brought an offering from themselves to the ever-living, of gold, silver, and brass, and azure, and purple, and blue, red, and spun linen, and rams' skins, dyed red, and badger skins, and acacia wood, and oil for the lamps, and perfumes for the oil of consecration, and incense for the veils, and onyx stones, and stones for the setting of the ephod and breastplate. Whilst those of skill among them came and made all that the ever-living commanded. The enclosures of the tent and its veils, the hooks and the planks, the crossbars, the standards and the bases, the ark and the staves for it, the covers and the covering veil, the table and its staves, and all its appurtenances, and the shewbread, and the reflectors for the lamps, and the appurtenances for them, and the burners, and the oil for the lights, and the incense altar and its staves, and the oil of consecration, and the perfumes for the aromatics, and the veil for the door at the opening of the sanctuary, the altar of burnt offering and its base of brass, the staves and the whole of the instruments, the bath and its bases, the curtains for the court and its standards and their bases, and the screen for the gate of the court, the stakes for the sanctuary, and the stakes for the court, and the rest. The robes for the service, when serving in the holy place, the sacred robes for Aaron the priest, and the robes for his sons the priests. Then the whole of the chiefs of the children of Israel came before Moses, and brought whatever their heart suggested, and all that their spirit dictated to them, they brought as an offering to the ever-living, to supply the hall of assembly and its appurtenances, and for the sacred robes. Thus the chiefs coming to Moses, all who were of liberal heart, brought ear and nose rings, and brooches, and beads, and all things made of gold, and everything which was adorned with gold to the ever-living. Every man also who possessed azure, and purple, and blue, red, and spun linen, and red goat skins, and badger skins, brought them. Many nobles brought gifts of silver and brass as presents to the ever-living, or of anything they possessed. Some brought acacia wood for the works. And the skillful women brought yarn in their hands, azure yarn, and purple, and blue-red, and linen. All the men also who were skillful in spinning, invited by their hearts, gave goat-hair yarn. Other men brought precious stones to set the ephod and the breastplate, and perfumes and oil for the lights, and for the consecration oil, and perfumes for the incense. Every man and woman with a liberal heart brought all the things that the ever-living commanded by the hand of Moses to be made as gifts to the ever-living. Then Moses said to the children of Israel, The ever-living has called Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hor, of the tribe of Judah, and has filled him with genius, skill, intelligence, and knowledge, and a mechanical mind, and inventive faculties, for working in gold and silver and brass, and to cut stones for jewelry, and to shape timber for use, and for all engineering work. He has also given as a fitting assistant to him Ahialab, the son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan, filling them with intelligence to work in every kind of contrivance, in jewelry and embroidery, in azure and purple, in blue and red and flax, and to weave all materials, and to make patterns. Chapter 36. Bezalel and Aholiab consequently worked, with all the skillful men to whom the ever-living had given intelligence and understanding, to assist them in their operations for the production of all the furniture for the sanctuary which the ever-living had commanded. Thus Moses appointed Bezalel and Aholiab, and all the skillful men, to whom the ever-living had given an intelligent mind, with every one whose mind invited them to go to the work to effect it. And they received in the presence of Moses all the offerings that the children of Israel had brought to make the appliances for the services of the sanctuary. They fetched their part from the treasury, morning by morning, and every skilled worker brought back the articles for the sanctuary which he had made from his workshop, until they reported to Moses, saying, The material which the people have brought is more than the requirements for the furniture that the ever-living commanded to be made from it. Moses therefore ordered to make a proclamation in the camp, to inform every man and woman not to bring further material to offer for the sanctuary. So the people ceased to bring it, for the material was sufficient for all the appliances that had to be made, and in excess. So the workmen made the furniture for the tent. 10 curtains of spun linen, and azure, and purple, and blue red, with pictures of cherubim, formed in damask. The length of the curtains was 18 cubits each, and the width 4 cubits, each curtain, the same to each curtain, and the end of one curtain was joined to the other, and the next curtain's edge was joined to the following. For they made loops upon the selvage of each of the curtains at the end of the edges. Thus they made the curtains with attachments to join the two. They made 50 loops on each curtain, and 50 loop attachments were made upon the second curtain, which joined it to the next, opposite to the loops, one for one. They also made 50 hooks of gold to join the curtains one to the other, so as to form one tent. They also made curtains of goatskins for the canopy over the tent, which were divided into 20 curtains. The length of each curtain was 30 cubits, and 4 cubits broad for each curtain. All the 20 curtains were made equal, and they joined 5 of the curtains together, and 6 of the curtains together, and made 50 loops on the lip of a curtain, at its edge to fasten with, and made 50 loops upon the lip of the second curtain for fastenings. They also made hooks of brass to join the canopy to form it into one piece. Then they made the hall of assembly of red rams' skins, with a veranda of badger skins over all of it. They also made the planks for the tabernacle of acacia wood planed. The length of a plank was 10 cubits, and 1.5 cubits broad for each plank. There were 2 hands to each plank at the joinings on one side and the other. They made the same to all the planks of the tabernacle. 20 planks were made for the tabernacle on the side towards the south, and 40 bases of silver were formed under the 20 planks, 2 bases under a plank with 2 hands on them. And for the opposite side towards the north they made 20 planks, with 40 bases of silver, 2 bases for each plank. But the width of the tabernacle to the west was 6 planks, and 2 planks made the corners of the tabernacle at the corners. And there were clutches fitting together and uniting them. Thus both were fastened at their edges. Thus there were 8 planks and 16 silver bases, 2 bases and 2 bases under each plank. He also made bars of acacia wood, 5 bars for the planks at the first side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars to the planks at the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars to the planks of the tabernacle at its length towards the west. And bars were made for the uprights placed between the sets of planks from end to end. The planks, however, were plated with gold, and their buttons were made of gold with lock holes to each one, and the bars were plated with gold. The veils also were made of azure, and purple, and blue red, and spun linen, with damasked cherubims worked on them. They also made 4 posts of acacia, and plated them with gold, with pins of gold, and cast for them 4 bases of silver. They also made a screen for the door of the sanctuary of azure, and purple, and blue red, and spun linen, worked as embroidery. And the 5 pillars, and the pins, with the chapiters on their heads, and the rods were of gold, but the 5 bars were of brass. Chapter 37. Bezalel himself made the ark of acacia wood, its length 2.5 cubits, and its breadth 1.5 cubits, and 1.5 cubits its height. And he plated with pure gold within and without, and made it a wreath of gold around, and cast 4 knobs of gold for its 4 feet, 2 knobs at the one side, and 2 knobs at the other side. He also made staves of acacia wood, and plated them with gold, so that they could put the staves into the ears upon the sides of the ark to carry the ark by. He also made covers of pure gold, 2.5 cubits in length, and 1.5 cubits in width. Besides, he made 2 cherubim of gold. They were made standing at the 2 ends of the covers, 1 cherub at this end, and the other at that. But the cherubim were extending their wings like a protection from above, with their wings over the covers, with the face of each towards the other over covers. The cherubim faced each other. He also made the table of acacia wood, 2 cubits in length, and 1.5 cubits in breadth, and 1.5 cubits in height, and plated it over with pure gold, and made a coronal round about it of gold. He also made a ridge of a handbreadth around it, with rays of gold upon the ridge all round, and cast 4 tabs of gold, and fixed the tabs upon the 4 sides where its feet were. The tabs were fixed near the ridge for the staves to carry the table with. He made the staves to carry the table of acacia wood, and plated them with gold, as well as the instruments that were upon the table, the dishes and the snuffers, and the cups and the plates which covered them, of pure gold. He also made the lamp of turned work of pure gold. Its shank, upright stalk, its branches, its cups, and blossoms were made of it. And there were 6 branches going from the sides, 3 branches from one side, and 3 branches from the other side. There were 3 almond cones and flowers upon one branch, a cup and a blossom, and 3 almond cones and flowers on an alternate branch, a cup and a blossom. Thus 6 branches rose up for the lamps. And upon the lamp 4 cones like almonds, a cup and a blossom. But there was a ball between 2 of the branches mutually, and a ball between 2 of the branches mutually, and a ball between 2 of the branches mutually, for the 6 branches that rose up from them. There were balls and branches for them mutually. All the appliances were of pure gold. He also made 7 reflectors, and holders, and snuffers of pure gold. A talent weight of pure gold made these, and all the instruments. Afterwards he made the altar of incense of acacia wood. Its length was a cubit, and its breadth a cubit square, and its height 2 cubits, with its horns. And he covered the top of it with pure gold, and around its sides and its horns, and made a coronal of gold around it. He also made 2 tabs of gold for it between the coronal, upon the 2 sides, upon its opposite sides, to insert the 2 staves to carry it by. He made the staves also of acacia wood, and plated them with gold. He also made the holy consecration oil, and the incense of pure spices for perfume. Chapter 38. Then he made of acacia wood the altar of burnt offerings. Its length was 5 cubits, and its breadth 5 cubits square, and its height 3 cubits. He also made horns upon its 4 faces. Its horns were all alike, and he plated them with brass. Besides, he made all the instruments for the altar, the cauldrons, and the brushes, and the sprinklers, and the rakes, and the shovels he made of brass. He also made for the altar a netted sieve of brass under its fireplace, with projections at its edges. And he cast 4 tabs of brass for the borders of the sieve, as receptacles for staves which he made of acacia wood, and covered them with brass, and placed the staves in the tabs at the sides of the altar to carry it by. He made them to fit into valves. He also made the bath and its pedestals of brass, with the mirrors for the use of whoever served before the hall of assembly. He also made the court at the side towards the south. The curtains for the court were 100 cubits of spun linen, the pillars 20, and the bases 20. The spikes of the pillars and the pins were of brass, but the rods of silver. And on the north face it was 100 cubits, with 20 pillars and 20 bases. The spikes of the pillars were brass, but the rods of silver. But on the west face the curtains were 50 cubits, 10 pillars and the bases, with spikes for the pillars, but the rods were of silver. And upon the eastern face the sunrise, 50 cubits. 15 cubits of curtains to the gateposts, 6 pillars and 6 bases, but from the other gatepost on this side and that, to the gate of the court, curtains for 15 cubits, 6 pillars and 6 bases. All the curtains around the court were of spun linen, and the bases of the pillars were of brass, but the spikes of the pillars and the rods were of silver, and the capitals of the pillars of silver, with rods of silver for all the pillars of the court. The screen for the gate of the court, however, was made of embroidery of azure, and purple, and blue-red, and spun linen, and its length was 20 cubits, and in height at the fold-back 5 cubits, to the juncture with the curtains of the court, with 4 pillars and 4 bases of brass, but the pins of silver, and the capitals of the heads of the pillars of silver, with all the other things for the tent and the court around of brass. These were the officers of the tent, the hall of assembly, which were appointed by the mouth of Moses for the service of the Levites, under Ithamar, the son of Aaron the priest, with Bezalel the son of Uri, the son of Hor of the tribe of Judah, to make everything that the ever-living had commanded by Moses, and with them Aholiab the son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan, to engrave and damask and embroider in azure and purple and blue and red, and in spinning. The whole of the gold that was used in the furniture of the sanctuary was 29 talents, and 930 shekels by the sacred weight. And of silver from the chiefs of the congregation 100 talents, and 1,757 shekels by the sacred weight. The half-shekel poll tax by the sacred weight, from those who were passed into the regiments, from 20 years of age and over that, was 630,550. And there were used 100 talents of silver in casting the bases of the sanctuary, and the bases of the doors, 100 bases from 100 talents, a talent to a base. They also used 1,775 for the spikes to the pillars, and the capitals on their heads, and the rods for them. Besides, the brass offered was 70,000 talents, and 400 shekels, which were used for the bases of the doors of the hall of assembly, and the brass of the doorposts, and the brazen altar, and the lattice work of brass for it, and the whole of the instruments of the altar, with the bases of the court around, and the bases of the gates of the court, and all the rest of the tent, and the remainder of the court around. Chapter 39. And of the azure, and purple, and blue-red, they made the service robes, to serve in the sanctuary, as well as the holy robes for Aaron, as the ever-living commanded to Moses. They also made the ephod of gold, azure, purple, and blue-red, and spun linen. And there were strips of golden wire twisted in the working among the azure, and among the purple, and among the blue-red, and among the linen threads that made the damasking. They made shoulder-pieces that joined upon the two halves by a seam. They also made the breastplate of the ephod, to be worn over it, of gold, azure, and purple, and blue-red, and spun linen, as the ever-living commanded Moses. Besides, they made 2 onyx stones surrounded with gold settings, engraved like the engraving of a seal, with the names of the sons of Israel, and placed them upon the shoulders of the ephod as memorial stones for the sons of Israel, as the ever-living commanded to Moses. They also made the breastplate of damasked work, as they made the ephod, of gold, and azure, and purple, and blue-red, and spun linen. The breastplate was made a square doubled, a span long and a span broad, doubled, and it was filled with 4 rows of stones. The first row was a ruby, a topaz, and a diamond. The second row was an emerald, a sapphire, and an opal. The third row was a ligure, an agate, and an amethyst. And the fourth row was a tarshish, an onyx, and a jasper, surrounded by settings of gold to fix them. Thus there were 12 stones with the names of the sons of Israel, with the names engraven like a seal, each with one name of the 12 tribes. They also made for the breastplate chain borderings of plated work of pure gold. Beside which they made 2 gold fastenings and 2 buttons of gold, and fixed the 2 buttons upon the 2 sides of the breastplate, and placed the 2 chains of gold upon the 2 buttons at the sides of the breastplate, and the 2 ends of the 2 chains they fixed upon the 2 buttons, and fastened them upon the 2 shoulders over the front of them. They also made 2 gold buttons, and placed them upon the 2 edges of the breastplate, upon the lips which went over the ephod inwards. Besides, they made 2 buttons of gold, and fixed them upon the 2 shoulders of the ephod, before and behind, to unite together at the top of the ephod with the breastplate. And they laced the breastplate, from button to button, to the ephod with laces of azure, to secure the breastplate to the ephod, so that the breastplate might not fall off from the ephod, as the ever-living had commanded to Moses. They also made a mantle for the ephod, of azure woven velvet, and the mouth of the mantle was in the middle of it, like a coat of mail, with a binding around it, so that it might not tear. And they made on the hem of the mantle pomegranates of azure, and purple, and blue-red, with embroidery, and also made bells of pure gold, and fixed the bells between the pomegranates, upon the hem around the mantle between the pomegranates, a bell and a pomegranate upon the hem around the mantle, as the ever-living commanded to Moses. They also made vests of woven linen work for Aaron and his sons, and turbans of linen, and mitres of linen, and white drawers of spun linen, with girdles of spun linen, and azure, and blue-red, as the ever-living commanded Moses. They also made the flower of the holy crown of pure gold, and engraved upon it, with the engraving of a seal, Holiness to the ever-living, and fixed a cord of azure upon it, to fasten it upon the top, as the ever-living commanded to Moses. Thus were completed all the appliances for the hall of assembly. They were made in the manner that the ever-living commanded to Moses. Therefore they brought the tent to Moses. The sanctuary and all its furniture, its hooks, its planks, its bars, its pillars and bases, and the awning of red ram skins, and the awning of badger skins, and curtains for the screen, with the ark of witnesses, and its staves and its covers, and the table and all its furniture, and the shewbread, with the lamp of splendor, and its reflectors, and its series of lamps, and the whole of its appliances, and the oil for the lamps, with the altar of gold, and the oil of consecration, and the sweet incense, and the screen of the veil of the pavilion, the brazen altar, and the brass grating for it, its staves, and all its instruments, the bath and its buckets, the curtains of the court, its pillars and their bases, and the screen for the gate of the court, its ropes and pegs, and the rest of the appliances for the uses of the tent of the hall of assembly, the ornamented robes for service in the sanctuary, the sacred robes for Aaron, the priest, and the robes for his sons, the priests. According to all that the ever-living commanded to Moses, the children of Israel made the whole for the service. Then Moses inspected all the work to see if they had made all of it according to the command of the ever-living. They had done so, and Moses blessed them. Chapter 40. Then the ever-living spoke to Moses, saying, Tomorrow is the 1st month. Upon the 1st of the month you shall set up the tent of the hall of assembly, and place there the ark of witnesses, and cover the ark with the veil. Then you shall bring the table, and arrange its appliances, and bring the golden lamp, and set up its reflectors. And place the golden altar of incense before the ark of the witnesses, and fix the screen of the doors to the tabernacle. Then place the altar of burnt offering opposite the door of the hall of assembly, and set the bath between the hall of assembly and the altar, and put water in it. Afterwards fix up the court around, and put the screen to the gate of the court. And then take the oil of consecration, and consecrate the tent, and everything in it, and sanctify it, and the whole of its furniture, when it shall be sacred. The altar shall be holy of holies. Next consecrate the bath and its buckets, and sanctify it. Then present Aaron and his sons at the door of the hall of assembly, and wash them with water, and clothe Aaron in the sacred robe, and consecrate him. Thus you shall make him holy, and he shall be a priest to me. Afterwards present his sons, and clothe them with vests, and consecrate them as you consecrated their father, and they shall be priests to me. And the consecration shall be an appointment of them as priests forever in their descendants. Moses consequently did all that the ever-living commanded him. He effected it. Thus it was in the 1st month, in the 2nd year, on the 1st of the month, they erected the tent. And Moses set up the tent, and fixed its bases, and placed its planks, and fixed its curtains, and erected its pillars, and spread the canopy over the tabernacle, and put the awning of the tabernacle over its roof, as the ever-living commanded him. Then he took and put the witnesses into the ark, and placed the staves to the ark, and put the covers upon the top of the ark, and brought the ark to the tent, and hung the veil of the screen, and veiled off the witnesses, as the ever-living commanded Moses. Then he placed the table in the hall of assembly at the north side of the tabernacle, outside of the veil, and arranged upon it the prepared bread before the ever-living, as the ever-living commanded to Moses. Next he placed the lamp in the hall of assembly, upon the table opposite at the south side of the tabernacle, and raised the lights before the ever-living, as the ever-living commanded Moses. Then he placed the golden altar in the hall of assembly before the veil, and offered sweet incense upon it, as the ever-living commanded Moses. Then he put the screen to the door of the tabernacle, and set the altar of burnt offering at the door of the tent of the hall of assembly, and offered upon it the burnt offering and the gift, as the ever-living commanded Moses. Then he placed the bath between the hall of assembly and the altar, and put water in it to wash with. And Moses washed himself his feet and hands there, with Aaron and his sons. Before going into the hall of assembly and approaching the altar, they washed themselves, as the ever-living commanded Moses. They also erected the court around the tabernacle, and the altar, and fixed the screen at the gate of the court. Then Moses ceased from his labors. Then the cloud covered the hall of assembly, and the splendor of the ever-living filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to go into the hall of assembly, for the cloud rested upon it. And the splendor of the ever-living filled the tent. Afterwards, when the cloud arose from off the tabernacle, the children of Israel marched in all their marches. And if the cloud did not arise, then they did not march until the day when it arose. For the cloud of the ever-living was upon the tabernacle by day, and there was a fire by night. It was in the sight of the house of Israel in all their marches. The end of chapters 33 through 40, and the end of the book of Exodus. Recording by Mark Penfold.